Whoa, whoa, whoa. A police helicopter soared into the sky, gradually flew away, turned into a small black spot, and slowly disappeared in everyone's eyes. Ah. What's going on? In the camp, Jiro came out yawning, rubbing her eyes in a daze. Her quirks, the headphone jack made her hearing very sharp, so naturally she woke up the fastest, and as a qualified person, she didn't need tutoring to sleep naturally. There is a lot of plenty, and I don't want other people. Even if I hear the sound, I don't want to probe under the covers. Jiro, go and wake everyone up to gather and wait for the review, Shang Tai said while looking at Jiro, who walked out. Waiting for review? Jiro looked in the direction of Aizawa Shota in a daze, then stared sharply. Is this the police? Why would the police come here? Jiro's face was full of astonishment, and the dozing god was instantly frightened and disappeared without a trace. You'll find out later. Wake up all the girls and boys first. Aizawa Shota frowned and repeated again. Yes. Jiro finally came to his senses, quickly responded, and then quickly ran to the camp. Eraserhead, your student, looks very tired. Shangying's special training is very hard. On the side, a middle-aged policeman seemed to know Aizawa Shota, looked at the scene in front of him, and suddenly laughed. No, it's just that they haven't trained before. Their bodies haven't gotten used to it yet. To be honest, the intensity of the training wasn't too high yesterday. Aizawa Shota obviously knew the policeman, and explained with a calm face. Don't be too harsh, they are just students. The middle-aged policeman said with a smile. It's because I'm a student that I have to be harsh, Aizawa Shota replied. It still hasn't changed. The middle-aged policeman smiled and shook his head, not saying anything, and a few other policemen were waiting in front of the camp for the students to start gathering. In the camp, in the boys' shop, a few of the more vigilant boys had already been woken up by the sound of the helicopter, but yesterday's training and last night's tutoring made them sleepy to death, huddled under the covers. Keep your head down. Then. Buzz buzz, a series of noises reverberated non-stop in the Datong shop. What happened? It's so noisy. Asshole. Under the comfortable quilt, the boys woke up instantly, covered their ears one by one and got up and cursed. Ms. Aizawa told everyone to gather quickly at the gate of the camp. Don't dawdle, hurry up. The buzzing noise stopped, and outside the gate, Jiro's stern but slightly snickering voice came to the boys in their ears. Boys wearing big underpants are standing in the bedroom. Everyone is aggrieved. Can't they use a normal way to wake people up? But hearing Jiro's footsteps going away, what else could they do? They looked at each other. Even Bakugo was aggrieved and speechless. However, Jiro's special way of yelling to get up is not without benefits. At least none of the boys who wake up now feel sleepy and want to get under the covers. Cursing in a low voice, they put on their clothes and rushed towards the gate of the camp. At the gate of the camp, when the boys arrived, the girls had already come over. Obviously, Jiro was definitely the girl who went to call first, and from the way they chatted, you knew that the way of waking up was not the same. However, before they asked Jiro Shingshi to question him, they saw 4 or 5 policemen standing beside Aizawa Shota. Everyone was stunned, with strange expressions on their faces. Why would the police come to their training camp in the forest? A group of boys suddenly silenced and quickly stepped forward to stand with the girls, discussing in a low voice. It was also at this time that they noticed that Li Tian was not here. Before they thought that Li Tian got up early, or escaped before Jiro made a sound, but there is no Li Tian here figure. However, looking at the serious Aizawa Shota, 4 people from Pussycat and 4 or 5 policemen, everyone who wanted to ask questions swallowed it back. After a while, footsteps were heard from the number on the side. Bradkin, the head teacher of Class B, hurried over with 20 students from Class B. Except for Bradkin, the students of Class B were stunned when they saw Class A and the police gathered here. Obviously, they didn't know what happened. Class B quickly stood up as a whole team, standing side by side with Class A. Officer Nakamura of the police came here because he needed everyone's assistance in investigating some matters. When the police summoned everyone cooperated to answer questions and then trained as usual. Bradkin stood up and said to the students. Teacher, classmate Li Tian is not here. Among the crowd, Yi Yin suddenly raised his hand and said. Li Tian went to cooperate with the police in the investigation, Aizawa Shota said lightly. Hearing what Aizawa Shota said, everyone below looked at each other in blank dismay. They were taken away for investigation, and only one person was taken away for investigation. What is the situation? The people who were urged to come here after getting up in the morning obviously didn't have Li Tian's bad habit of glancing at their mobile phones, so none of the people present at the moment knew that it had caused a certain sensation. But this kind of thing can't be hidden. Aizawa Shota did not intend to explain in detail, but continued to say, "Okay, wait a minute. Except for the students called by the police, everyone else will follow Pussycat to yesterday's training ground for training." After finishing speaking, Aizawa Shota and Bradkin each called 3 people from their own class and the police to enter the camp, leaving other students in place who couldn't help but want to discuss and even ask Pussycat beside them. But Mandalay Cat and Tiger directly stopped the crowd and led them to yesterday's training ground. On the police gunship that flew away from the camp, Li Tian looked curiously at the interior. Combining his past and present lives, it was also his first time to come into contact with helicopters, let alone police-armed helicopters. Unexpectedly, this time he was lucky enough to sit for a while. Young Li Tian. On the side, All Might looked at Li Tian and asked in a deep voice, "Did you offend some villain organization with your recent activities?" Offend the villain organization? Li Tian was startled, and then quickly reacted. This kind of full-scale mobile phone news push cannot be just the handwriting of one person. Even Li Tian couldn't help wondering if he had a soul when he saw it, and he controlled the organization. However, after listening to All Might's questioning, Li Tian understood, All Might. This means believing that he is not Savatara. While Li Tian was moved by this, he couldn't help feeling a little ashamed, because the only time I offended the villain organization was in my island. Li Tian spread his hands helplessly and said, "The number of times I have fought against villains so far is the League of Villains in USJ, and the villain who caught the gangsters at Best Jeanist and my island incident organized Silver Fox and League of Villains." League of Villains? Silver Fox? All Might frowned. League of Villains, there is no doubt that it is a disciple of his rival All for One, and it is also written by the grandson of his master Shimura Nana. After being arrested, Sigong Muhong has gradually taken over the remnants of All for One's dark empire that was once defeated by him and has grown stronger. As for Silver Fox, because of his existence in the past, Silver Fox's power in Neon was not that great, but in the international arena, it is definitely a villain organization that can be counted. Moreover, after he retired due to injury, this villain organization is also the villain organization that wants to get involved in Neon first. Even now, Neon has begun to grow its power. During this time, the police and professional hero have fought against this international villain organization. But what makes All Might frown is that this time's handwriting is not like the actions of the League of Villains in the Silver Fox organization. Whether it is the League of Villains or the Silver Fox, although it may be a very dangerous villain organization in terms of combat power, but in terms of technology and influence, whether it is the League of Villains who only took over the dark forces that were crippled by him, or it's just Silver Fox with good international strength, but it's very unlikely that they will have such a skill in Neon. Does there still exist such a strong villain organization in China? All Might took a deep breath, with a look of seriousness on his face. There used to be a symbol of peace. This mountain was pressing down on it, even a tiger had to lie down, and a dragon had to coil up, but he was seriously injured and retired. What kind of monster Shendu jumped out? It seems that the cultivation of Green Valley Ewes has to speed up. All Might made a decision in his heart. Li Tian at the side apparently didn't expect that he would make All Might think so deeply just by saying something casually, but it's not a bad thing, and All Might didn't think in the wrong direction either. Don't worry, young man Li Tian, the police will definitely investigate this incident and clear your name. All Might comforted in a deep voice. Yeah. Li Tian nodded, and said casually, I believe in the police, and I also believe in trust Savitar. As soon as Li Tian said this, the policeman and All Might sitting next to Li Tian were all taken aback, looking at Li Tian with some confusion. Young Li Tian, what do you mean? Or Matt asked with a frown. Of course it's this. Li Tian shook his phone and said with a chuckle, when I just saw the news this morning, I was really taken aback. Especially the details inside and the instructions were saying that Savitar was my hint, that it scared the hell out of me. Li Tian shook his head while speaking. He was not talking nonsense, but he was really shocked. However, after thinking about it carefully, I came to my senses. I don't know whether the villain who did this thing is crazy or stupid, and even used such childish means to frame up. Let's not mention the inside about I will not mention the evidence of the Osaka Bay incident. But the whole article does not give the slightest evidence that Soeda is a first-year student of Shangying High School. According to the investigation, it is very likely to be a certain student in the hero department of this year's first-year Shangying High School. Student, can this kind of thing be used as evidence? Li Tian said, with a mocking sneer on his face, If this kind of casual talk can be used as evidence, it would be too ridiculous, and as long as Savitar appears, this kind of the rumors are absolutely self-defeating, and there is no need to look for other evidence. And I also read that report. Although the Savitar shot was a bit cruel, the other party undoubtedly targeted Hero. This kind of naked frame-up involving him will definitely be accepted by the other party. Come forward and clarify. Indeed. All Might nodded at the side. Naturally, he and Mr. Principal would not have thought of such a simple matter, and it had already been discussed before. In fact, Mr. Principal and I have discussed this point a long time ago. However, both Mr. Principal and I think that villain will not make such a big mistake, especially if there is such a big mistake. Such a big villain, such obvious mistakes and omissions are simply impossible. So, the other party must have a backup. All Might said in a deep voice. The few policemen on the side also nodded. Naturally, the police would not have thought of this kind of thing. When they came out to perform the mission, Shangfeng also simply explained it to them. The backhand. The backhand is nothing more than what happened to Savitar, so that they can confidently believe that Savitar will not come out. Li Tian shook his head and said, but that is about the incident in Osaka Bay according to the detailed report. The strength of that Savitar is absolutely extraordinary, killing 127 villain in just a few minutes. With this kind of strength, especially when the other party's identity is still kept secret, if you want to be captured by villain quietly, unless you are a villain who is comparable to All Might in your level, I will not do it. I believe that the organization of the villain will be comparable to All Might you. Li Tian looked at All Might and said with a smile. Well. Indeed. All Might didn't care about Li Tian's words using him as a unit of measurement of combat power, but thought carefully about the meaning of Li Tian's words, and nodded. Through the detailed battle process information obtained by the police from the villain who survived, Savitar, and with All Might's experience, it is very easy to judge the approximate strength of Savitar. Definition. Even without knowing that Li Tian is Savitar, All Might thinks that he definitely knows the strength of Savitar better than Li Tian. With that kind of strength, even if he is, it is impossible for him to win the opponent quietly without disturbing the officials, unless it was 6 years ago, when he was not injured and his strength was the strongest, he would have such confidence. Is it possible that the other party has already contacted Savitar and jointly framed him? A policeman suddenly asked. No, it's unlikely. It wasn't All Might or Li Tian who spoke, but another middle-aged police officer who looked more senior. The matter has come to this point, and I'm not afraid to tell you that the higher-ups actually contacted Savitar after the Osaka Bay incident. The police officer said in a deep voice. Contact Savitar? Everyone present, including Li Tian, was shocked. However, other people were surprised that the so-called higher authorities had contacted Savitar, while Li Tian was surprised that this matter could alert an insider, knowing that the person who officially contacted Savitar must not be a simple person. Unfortunately, although the other party was a policeman, he did not show his police rank, and Li Tian could not determine the other party's identity. Is this incident so big? Li Tian was a little puzzled. The middle-aged police officer went on to say, in the Osaka Bay incident, although Savitar violated the Quirks Management Act and acted brutally, the higher-ups judged that the other party acted mercilessly in order to save the thousands of hostages. It was extremely hot, so afterwards, even though Savitar was defined as a villain and a warrant was issued, he still found a way to contact Savitar. On the condition that no professional hero and special operations teams will be organized to hunt down the other party and investigate the other party's true identity. The real reason for the villain is not to make the other party agree. There is such an inside story. All Might was also a little surprised. It is defined as a villain and a wanted warrant has been issued, but there will be no official pursuit. This is the first time even All Might has seen such a thing. The middle-aged police officer nodded, just like the Post said, the Osaka Bay incident is indeed a rare victory worthy of being recorded. The villain suffered heavy casualties, but thousands of hostages were killed in this incident. No one was injured in the process. This kind of record, only All Might you have done, but the opponent is indeed an underground hero without a hero license, so, out of respect for hero and profession considering Hero's fishing boat, this decision was made at the top. I see. All Might also understood. Thus, the possibility of Savitar and the villain organization joining forces this time is not impossible, but it is not too great. The middle-aged police officer said. That. Can I ask a few questions? Li Tian asked weakly, raising his hand from the side. Okay. Several police officers who were discussing enthusiastically and All Might all looked at Li Tian. Is this matter really that serious? Isn't it just that the villain took revenge on me and made a fuss? Li Tian asked, a little puzzled. Hearing Li Tian's question, no matter whether it was the middle-aged police officer or All Might, they all shook their heads solemnly. Young man Li Tian, you think this matter is too simple? All Might said in a concentrated voice, although the other party may have the mentality of revenge on you, but the other party is not just you, but Xiangying and others. A student in the hero department of the grade is a murderous villain. This kind of incident will definitely hit hero very seriously. Li Tian pretended to be dazed. He could naturally imagine this, but even if Xiangying was involved, it shouldn't be so serious, right? Suddenly, Li Tian thought of something. His expression couldn't help but startled. His reaction was a beat slower and he finally followed. His heart suddenly felt like a stormy sea. No way. That guy, can he have such an insidious plan? Thinking of that possibility, Li Tian was secretly startled. And it's not just about you and Xiangying. The bigger problem with this incident is to report the Osaka Bay incident and Savitar, the middle-aged police officer on the side. Compared to the fishing boat problem that Savitar may cause to the society, you and the problem of Xiangying High School can only be said to be incidentally involved by the villain. All Might on the side also nodded. He also considered this after meeting with the police. And Li Tian also looked on the sidelines in a dazed manner. It was only after he asked the question that he suddenly thought of it. Before thinking about possessing the soul, he was only taking revenge on him, but for a while, he forgot that Savitar, the scapegoat of the vest, was the biggest problem. That is to say, the opponent's goal or ultimate goal is not me at all. Just need a pawn to pull Savitar to Hero High School, the banner of the Hero Society, or even All Might, the symbol of peace chess pieces. Li Tian couldn't help feeling a headache as he spoke. That's right. The middle-aged police officer looked at Li Tian in astonishment. He also didn't expect that Li Tian, a student, could think of this. Savitar, a man who did not have a hero license but illegally used quirks to defeat the villain gang and saved thousands of people. This is undoubtedly what Hero did, but the same, there is no doubt that it is violating the law that provokes the current superhuman society. If there is a behind-the-scenes, no, it should be said that the behind-the-scenes mastermind makes things big. The fishing boat only needs a little guidance, and there is no doubt that it will impact the current Hero Quirks management, one of the pillars of society. Following Li Tian's narration, the faces of the middle-aged police officer and several other police officers on the side became more and more surprised, especially the other few police officers. Even they had never thought of such a thing or never thought about it. As expected of the first place in the hero department of Xiangying High School this year, your thinking is really quick. The middle-aged police officer praised with emotion, as you said, this incident is definitely not a temporary intention, but some of the reactionaries have been plotting for a long time. If Savitar, the person involved in the Osaka Bay incident, hadn't acted too harshly, some of them didn't fit the hero in the hearts of the people, otherwise, this matter would not have involved you at all. There is Xiangying High School. So, I have to thank me for being ruthless. Li Tian complained silently in his heart, but he really felt a headache now. So many things. That guy, it really isn't easy. Li Tian sighed in his heart. But fortunately, this matter is not without room for reversal. The means he arranged in advance, although he dare not say that this matter will be settled, but it is not a big problem to remove himself and Xiangying. The rest. Let's leave it to the officials of this world. Li Tian blamed the officials without the slightest hesitation. At this time, All Might, who had been thinking on the side, suddenly spoke. Could it be a game of knife from beginning to end? As soon as All Might said this, the eyes of Li Tian and the middle-aged police officer beside him changed instantly. Looking at All Might was like looking at a fool. Of course they understood what All Might meant. Savitar is the person in the Black Hand organization behind the scenes, and his appearance has been for this moment from the very beginning. This is a great idea and a great idea, but even if Li Tian is not Savitar, this answer can be ruled out directly. Ahem, it shouldn't be. If according to All Might, Savitar's appearance was around from the beginning, then the other party would not have made such a ruthless attack during the incident in Osaka Bay, but killed him. Kill one or two villain, subdue most of the villain, save the hostages, and finally be defined as villain. This is the most suitable script, but the reality. The middle-aged police officer coughed lightly with a sound, he said with a straight face. Yes. All Might heard the middle-aged police officer nodding thoughtfully. If the opponent had deliberately set up a situation from the very beginning, there shouldn't be such a big mistake. You know, now that the Osaka Bay incident broke out, the character, Savitar, will definitely become a character with mixed reputations, whether it is a vicious villain or a ruthless hero. One point will definitely be arguing on the internet. However, for the quirks management method that wants to attack one of the foundations of the current Superman society, it is still a little bit worse, far worse. A hero who goes astray in order to save people is more likely to provoke people dissatisfaction with the quirks management law. After all, in that case, most of the people would definitely prefer to forgive the hero who went astray like a vulnerable group. After all, they only killed a few villains who were already damned, and they also saved thousands of abducted women. But the law is the law. If it is because of a certain person who is extrajudicial, especially a well-known person like Savitar, then this law will definitely not be as powerful as before. However, instead of pardoning Savitar and continuing to judge the misguided hero as villain, then even if the incident is suppressed in the end, a large number of people will inevitably be against the quirks management law and the government's extremely dissatisfied. In this case, it is the most effective way to shake the foundation of Superman society. Instead of turning into a dark hero with an extremely brutal record, forcing Hero and All Might to add to the superhuman society. Then what is the other party's purpose? All Might frowned and thought. I don't know, but the other party must have some tricks. Come and see that Savitar, Xiangying and All Might are related to you. The middle-aged police officer said in a deep voice, and at the same time, his eyes on Li Tian changed to scrutiny again. Li Tian was speechless, blinking helplessly. He suddenly had a feeling in his heart. If it is said that this matter is really related to the soul, the other party should have no backup, just make sure that he is Savitar. So he made such a plan. Mr. Principal, could that, Savita, really be our first-year student Li Tian? In Xiangying's campus, although it is summer vacation, there are still several teachers staying at the school to work. The cement secretary spoke in a deep voice, his face full of dignity. As a professional hero, he is well aware of how huge the impact on heroes will be if this matter is confirmed. That's unlikely. Although that student is very strong, even much stronger than that Savitar under his full strength, but if he can only show Savitar's level, he can do this kind of thing. If so, that's really unbelievable. The teacher of the support department, the power loader, also shook his head and said, it can be done. Mr. Principal propped his chin and said lightly, in that post, the police reenacted the battle of Savitar in the Osaka Bay incident. Li Tian can do it, and not difficult. Mr. Principal, what do you mean? Number 13 frowned. Number 13. People have eyebrows, but some of them are not obvious under peeping eyes. The fighting style of Savitar is very similar to that of a hero who has been sacrificed, a fast hero, Zhen Shu and He Wei, and quirks can increase their own action speed and shooting speed by 10 times in order to accelerate, while according to the police information, Savitar's fighting style is very similar to this sacrificed hero. It can even be said to be an enhanced version. Mr. Principal said softly. Zhen Shuan. Could it be? The cement secretary was startled, with a look of astonishment on his face. That's right. The hero who sacrificed was Li Tian's father. Li Tian's quirk's speed, force. It is undoubtedly the perfect combination of his parents and has been strengthened by more than +20. He wants to imitate his father's fighting style. It's not a difficult thing, and Li Tian's parents were both sacrificed in the Keeley Square incident in April. The principal sighed softly. The Keeley Square incident. I remember that the cause of that incident was a group of human traffickers villain, right? Number 13 was also shocked. That's right. Mr. Principal nodded and sighed. Because of a professional hero's mistake, several human trafficker villain took hostages and fled to Keeley Square, and one of the villain's quirks was a blood explosion, which turned several hostages into human bombs, and the professional hero caused that serious accident inadvertently. Strength and motivation are already there. The power loader said in a deep voice. It is now, the last evidence is missing, isn't it? Well, I think it won't be long before this strength, motivation, and evidence that we don't know will all be exposed. Mr. Principal nodded and said in a deep voice. Damn it. Could it be that our Xiangying is really going to fall into the hands of villain this time? The cement department growled angrily. Until the last moment, we can't come to a conclusion so quickly. Mr. Principal shook his head and said softly, no matter how much we talk about now, it's just a guess after all. We'll wait until classmate Li Tian and All Might come back. Let's talk about it after asking. The voice just fell. The loud sound of the propellers of the police helicopter gunship reached their ears. In the principal's office, facing the Mr. Principal of Xiangying School, the teacher of the cement department, the teacher of the power loader, All Might, and a police sergeant, 4 or 5 policemen, Li Tian looked bewildered. Wait a minute. You mean my parents died at the hands of human traffickers? Li Tian was astonished. That's right. Wait, you don't know? Mr. Principal was taken aback, and looked away with a confused face. I don't know. Li Tian shook his head honestly. How could you not know? Mr. Principal slammed the table, stood up, jumped up, and jumped directly onto the desk. At that time, the news was flying all over the city. Then what? Li Tian scratched his face. I was knocked out by the explosion in Keeley Plaza, and I woke up after being in a coma for 3 days, and when I woke up in the hospital. Halfway through the news on TV, the host said something about doubting whether some professional hero could do something, and my aunt shut it down angrily and began to comfort me. Regarding the villain, I don't know, did not see. After I was discharged from the hospital, I knew that villain had been caught and sent to prison by All Might, so I didn't have any intention of revenge to find out who villain was and what crimes he was charged with. It was my parents who died again. I don't want to read or check the news. Just now, I always thought that the incident was an explosion like the bomb demon. This. Mr. Principal was dumbfounded. The people next to them also looked at each other in blank dismay. Although this plot sounds a bit bizarre, it is not impossible logically, it is reasonable and legal. That headmaster, the motive, is it gone? The cement division asked weakly. It seems to be. Mr. Principal looked at a loss, he was a little bit convinced. Intuition told him. There is nothing wrong with this rhetoric. Even Mr. Principal's superstandard mind is having a headache at this time. Strength, motivation, and evidence, all they have now is the question of strength. However, just because Li Tian's strength is strong, he can't be said to be Savitar. Mr. Principal sat cross-legged on the table and began to meditate. His way of thinking is usually to think about what the villain would think and do, and then look for ways to break the game or even reverse the game. But now he can't keep up with villain and Li Tian's mind at all. Mr. Principal looked up at the sky, wanting to cry. These are all. What kind of players? At the same time, on the other side, the voice from Xiangying's principal's office came unreservedly and clearly. Everyone, what do you think about this matter? In a government conference room, a senior official said in a deep voice. How else can you see? Of course, listen with your ears. At the large desk, government officials looked at each other in blank dismay. Although in terms of their city and scheming, there is absolutely reason to suspect that Li Tian is lying to excuse. However, they really want to believe that seemingly absurd reason. I don't think that boy is Savitar, suddenly, one of them said in a deep voice. Huh. The officials at the desk looked at the person who spoke, their eyes full of doubts. Huh. Sir. Can't afford it. All of them have harmonious expressions, with expressions of listening attentively. The man ignored the gazes of many colleagues around him, but said with a blank expression, that young man is definitely not Savitar. No way, much less likely. After the voice fell, all the people around were stunned, and whoever was sitting there was not a human being, and then reacted instantly, and then showed a look of surprise. That's right, it won't be, it's even more impossible to be, and it can't be. Mud Flower Market. In a meeting room on the top floor of a building somewhere. Leader. The government has dispatched police computer experts and professional hackers to set up a special team, within 6 hours at most. That guy's address should be discovered. Do we need it? Help. A serious young man wearing glasses asked blankly. Huabada Kongchang. The Supernatural Freedom Jihad Army. Trust my morals, it is the name of the Supernatural People's Liberation Army that makes you angry, or the identity of the Freedom Jihad and terrorist organization Cadres, codename, Trumpet. No need. That guy's ability has been abolished. To the new society, he is just a waste. There is no need to expose us by helping him. I won't be tracked by the other party. Just let it go. Destro said very casually. Well. According to the forecast, we will be discovered by the hacker hero about 4 hours after we intervene in the promotion. To ensure safety, we will withdraw from the operation after 3 hours, that is, around 9 o'clock. Huabada Konkao said with a blank face, and passed the order out. After Hanabada Konkao delivered the order, Destro looked at the scorching sun rising outside the window, with tears running down the corner of his eyes. It's such a pity. A young man who was supposed to be our comrade passed away so quietly. Destro's voice was full of sorrow. That's because he himself is too arrogant. Huabada Kongchang helped his eyes and said with a blank expression, obviously, he invited him to join us a few years ago, but he relied on himself. As early as that moment, I expected today's situation. Yeah. Destro also nodded, still with a compassionate look on his face. In this society, supernatural powers are suppressed, and the only way to end up wanton is to become one of those hero stepping stones, being a victim of society. That's why we want to create a society that liberates supernatural powers. In such a world, supernatural powers will be the rights bestowed on us by the gods, to be mastered by ourselves, and no one can deprive us of the right to freely use supernatural powers. Following Destro's narration, the face of Hanabata Konkao, who had been keeping calm at the side, gradually revealed incomparable fanaticism. Such a world is the supreme world they pursue. Boom. The door of the conference room was pushed open. I'm so tired. A woman came in with a sigh. Cheui Jisui is one of the cadres of the Freedom Crusaders, code-named Curios. Have you collected all the information? Looking at the curiosity of walking in without knocking, Destro didn't care but asked directly. It's almost there. Curiosity lay on the table and said weakly, the information about Savitar and Jenkson Li Tian is almost collected, but there is no direct proof that the two of them are the same person. Evidence. Direct evidence. Destro frowned slightly, and said softly, in other words, there is circumstantial evidence. Well, there must be a little connection. Curiosity also sat up, not conforming to the previous lazy appearance, but said excitedly, although that Savitar has been active in Kyoto on weekdays, it is the first time it happened there in Tokyo, and at that time, it happened to be the time of on-site internship in the first year of Shangying High School, and at that time, Zhen Shuan Li Tian was doing an internship at the best genist office in the center of Tokyo. Although I don't know why he went to Kyoto, but with the quirks exposed by Li Tian, it is not impossible to travel between Shizuoka and Kyoto. Furthermore, the father of Jenkson Li Tian is a professional hero who has already sacrificed, and according to some fighting data of the other party, whether it is the ability or the fighting style, that Savitar is very similar to the other party, it's just that Savitar's strength is far stronger than that hero who sacrificed his profession. And on this point, Li Tian, who inherited the perfect combination of his father and mother's abilities, is absolutely capable of playing such a powerful Savitar, and, according to the investigation, that Savitar's shots were ruthless spicy. It often causes villain to suffer some serious injuries that are difficult to recover, but the real life-threatening incident is only the one in the Osaka Bay incident. Unfortunately, the villain who caused the other party's parents to sacrifice was the same human trafficker group as in the Osaka Bay incident. The reason for the fierce attack is very likely that the other party vented their anger when they saw the human trafficker group. As a result, the time, the motivation and the strength have all been there. If the possessed soul is not lying, and he can really see that the souls of these two people are the same, there are 9 out of 10 chances that Savitar and Zhen Shuan Li Tian are the same person.
Is it only possible? Destro frowned. Well, after all, the ability to speed up is not a rare ability, but to reach Savitar's level, you need to go through rigorous training, and you also need a very strong fighting ability. From this point of view, the shocking although Shuan Li Tian's ability can be condescending and easily imitated to be weaker, but that kind of skill can eliminate his suspicion to a certain extent. Curiosity said very casually.
Is that so? Then if he is really Savitar, is he suitable as a scripture? Destro said thoughtfully. Jing Yi. The expression on the face of Curiosity suddenly became a little dignified, and he shook his head decisively after thinking for a while. He is not suitable. If you want to become Jing Yi, you must need a tragic figure in this society. Although the person has a special identity, and also has the behavior of freely using supernatural powers in line with our behavior, but he is too strong, so strong that he does not look like a tragic figure at all, but a model of inspirational struggle. That's it. Destro also thought about his curiosity, and finally shook his head. Forget it. It seems that now is not the time for us to start the freedom jihad. Then leader, do you need to adjust the next action? Hanabata Konkao, who was on the side, suddenly asked. Of course not. Although it is not the time to start a holy war, the necessary seeds need to be sown. Those people doubt the laws that suppress supernatural powers. They will all be food for our jihad, and will contribute to our jihad for freedom. Discoro said, full of longing. Also, there is no need to act too hastily. Guide the fishing boat slowly, and when necessary, put the supporting evidence from the investigation of Curiosity on it in batches, so as to completely tie Xavius, Shangying and All Might together. Discoluo casually ordered. Huabata Konkao nodded in response. But the Curiosity on the side asked, the leader, what if Xavius is really not that Zhen Shuan Li Tian, but someone else, and the other party also comes out to clarify? Then don't contact Shangying and that student, but focus on promoting the deeds of that Savitar, and send someone to contact Savitar, and liberate the supernatural power from the book on the front without exposing us. Pass him the book and spread our ideas, Discoro said casually. Leader, are you Wanting to recruit Savitar? Curiosity was suddenly startled and thoughtful. Of course, a hero whose code of conduct agrees with our regulations, is powerful, is driven by us, and is full of popularity. After recruiting our side, he will inevitably start the holy war and become my side to promote us flag. Discoro said. Then, what if the other party does not agree to join? Curiosity asked. We are not terrorists. If we do not agree to join, of course, nothing has happened. Discoro chuckled. Besides, no matter whether the other party agrees or not, as long as they continue to carry out hero activities, then. The other party is our good friend. I understand what to do. Curiosity's eyes lit up, and he suddenly understood, and quickly responded. Discoluo nodded. Suddenly, he remembered something. By the way, that Jenkson Li Tian, if it proves that the other party is not Savitar, find a time to deal with him. After all, he agreed to the matter of the soul-possessed soul, so you can't easily break your promise, and that little guy's potential astonishing. If you continue to grow, you will definitely be our great enemy in the jihad in the future. Discoro opened his mouth and gave orders. Yes, I will order it immediately. Huabada Kongchang nodded in response. This order was definitely not based on the curiosity of the director of news and propaganda. As for the fact that it was finally confirmed that Li Tian is Savitar, then naturally, Discoro didn't need to tell him how to recruit Savitar, so he naturally recruited Li Tian. With soul? Who is he? Boom. The door was knocked open with a loud bang. Hold on. Police. A group of policemen broke into the door. At the same time, the window of the possessed soul, a professional hero figure directly broke through the window, rushed in and captured the possessed soul. Kangmu Soul, you are under arrest, the professional hero shouted. But even so, Kangmu Hunling, that is, the possessing soul, is still laughing wildly, with a pair of eyes revealing a chilling mad hatred. Sa Weitar. Zhen Xuan Li Tian. Do you think this matter will end easily? This matter will not end so easily, just wait. You will die, you will definitely die. Hey 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 ha too. In Xiangying's principal's office, Li Tian suddenly felt a strong awe. Li Tian sneezed out, rubbed his nose, and muttered a few words. Around him, Mr. Principal, All Might, Cement Division, Power Loader, No. 13, middle-aged police officers, and a large number of police officers surrounding every entrance and exit of the principal's office, as well as high-speed cameras everywhere. In this case, not to mention that Li Tian's speed is only a little over 6 times the speed of sound, even if it is 10 times the speed of sound, or 100 times the speed of sound, don't even think about walking around quietly before coming back. Seeing this kind of treatment in front of him, Li Tian couldn't help feeling proud. Even if it is just guarding the previous number 1 hero symbol of peace All Might, Mr. Principal, the Power Loader, number 13, Cement Division, and a high-level policeman, more than a dozen policemen, plus almost all surveilled by high-speed cameras. This is what I laid down. Ahem. This is the prestige he built in this world for 4 months. Li Tian really wanted to shout arrogantly now, who else? And all the people introduced above looked at Li Tian, who was smiling inexplicably, and his eyes gradually became strange. Is it possible that it's a silly criticism? Cuckoo Han Li Tian rubbed his stomach, his face was full of surprise. By the way, I forgot to eat breakfast. Under the gaze of everyone, Li Tian touched his pocket. Too bad. Didn't you bring your luggage back? Li Tian's complexion changed slightly, his high-energy sugar. Oh no, it's the high-energy pills in his luggage. Student Li Tian. What's the matter? Seeing Li Tian's face change slightly, the middle-aged police officer at the side became slightly vigilant and asked. Although they believe that Li Tian is unlikely to be Savitar, they have to be on the safe side, especially Li Tian's own quirks can indeed imitate Savitar's combat power, even not far from the outbreak. Far beyond Savitar's time. Well, when I came out this morning, I forgot to eat breakfast. I'm a little hungry. Li Tian said with some embarrassment. Can you ask someone to come and bring my luggage from the forest training camp? Breakfast. Why do I need to get my luggage somewhere? I'll just send someone to buy it. It just so happens that we haven't had breakfast yet, so let's have it together. The middle-aged police officer frowned slightly and said. Are you in charge of the food? Li Tian's eyes lit up, and he said happily, that's great. Hearing Li Tian's words, Mr. Principal, All Might, and Xiangying's other teachers who knew Li Tian's appetite all turned their heads and looked like they didn't care about me. Now is not the beginning of school, the school cafeteria is open, and the ingredients can be obtained at a cheap and high-quality price, and then distributed to hundreds of students, one in and one out, can barely maintain a break even. But now if you are in charge of food, you must buy it from restaurants outside, and with Li Tian's appetite. The lowest grade boxed lunch costs 70,000 to 80,000 yen, not to mention. Is it reasonable for the police to treat guests to breakfast and give hundreds of boxed lunches? Once this grade comes out, then the price will soar, 3 meals a day, at least 6 to 700,000 yen. And it doesn't have to be a few days. This money doesn't have to say a few teachers, even Shangying didn't want to pay for it. I'm familiar with the restaurants near Shangying, Li Tian Yishi said quickly, like the nearby Neon restaurant, and the Haijiwei Canteen, delicious udon restaurant. These restaurants are all good. The important thing is that the price is not expensive, and we can get them a 10% discount if we buy more than 100 people at one time. Why do we have breakfast for more than 100 people at one time? The middle-aged police officer suddenly had a bad feeling and asked quickly. Because my appetite is a bit big, Li Tian said as a matter of course. When he thought about it, the other party even found out who his father was and how he sacrificed himself, so he didn't even know his appetite. The appetite is a bit large. The middle-aged police officer saw that the people on his side were only in their early 20s, looked at Li Tian's thin body, and then looked at the people on the side who gave him affirmative glances. The Shangying teachers were a little dazed in their eyes. What kind of food is needed for breakfast for 100 people? Jingle bell. Suddenly, the middle-aged policeman's cell phone rang. Ignoring Li Tian, the middle-aged police officer quickly took out his mobile phone and answered the call. Listening to the report on the phone, the middle-aged police officer suddenly showed a look of joy on his face. Okay, I see, I will start asking right away. Huh. Li Tian looked at the middle-aged police officer who hung up the phone and frowned. Didn't you treat me to breakfast? Student Li Tian, there is something I want to ask you. The middle-aged police officer hung up the phone, then looked at Li Tian and asked in a deep voice, do you know a villain called Possessed Soul? Soul possession. Li Tian was slightly taken aback, a little unbelievable. This is. The soul possession was captured? I know. Li Tian nodded and said truthfully, I met this villain in the incident on my island. My island incident? The middle-aged police officer frowned. Can you please tell me more about your contacts? Due to the geographical location of my island and special reasons, the above case will not be handed over to the Neon Police, so even they only knew that Li Tian was involved in this incident at the time, but the specific process, they really don't know, and even he is unlikely to get a detailed report of the incident from my island. Yes. Li Tian nodded. During the My Island incident, I encountered the ghosts in the central control room on the top floor of the central tower, and I stunned all the villain there. Only he didn't lose consciousness, and then a phantom floated up from the opponent. I beat him away, and when I took notes afterwards, I learned from the police on my island that the villain might be Neon here. The villain has a soul. On this point, All Might can testify for me. Yeah. Young Li Tian is right. All Might on the side also nodded. Is that so? The middle-aged police officer nodded. Although he didn't believe Li Tian, he still trusted All Might. Middle-aged police officer, is this incident caused by some spirit? Mr. Principal frowned and asked in a low voice. Middle-aged police officer. Li Tian looked confused, although he called this police officer a middle-aged police officer in his heart, but it's not good to say it out of his mouth, right? That's right. I just received news that the police and professional hero have arrested villain at the hacker's IP address, possessing a soul, and the other party has no intention of denying this incident. Middle-aged the officer nodded. Hearing that the villain had been captured, Mr. Principal first breathed a sigh of relief, but then he frowned and asked. I've heard of the villain possessing souls. The other party does have good computer technology, as well as weird quirks and unknown identities to act recklessly. However, the other party's computer technology is obviously not capable of manipulating several cities. Send forced news on your mobile phone. Well, behind this incident, there must be a villain organization. But although he confessed to this incident, he did not confess to the villain organization information. The middle-aged police officer said, shaking his head and frowning. Wait a minute, I have a question? Li Tian asked suddenly. As far as I know, that possessed soul should always act as a quirk's possessed body double, and he has become a mystery, so he has been unable to catch him, but... What did you mean just now, police officer? He was caught living. Well, I caught the other party. Speaking of which, this matter is still related to you. The middle-aged police officer nodded and looked at Li Tian with a strange look. Is it related to me? Li Tian was stunned, very at a loss. How could it be related to him?
According to that ghost, His quirks were destroyed by you in the battle between my island and you. That's why he wanted to take revenge on you so madly. The middle-aged police officer's expression was pale. Weirdly said. To be honest, after so many years of experience in law enforcement, this is the first time he has heard that quirks was destroyed.
Quirks? Has it been destroyed? Li Tian was also startled, thinking of the 2 lightning bolts of speed and force he used to slash the opponent in my island. Seems to understand? Quirks possessing souls is obviously similar to the so-called spirits out of body and possessing souls, while in my island, he slashed the opponent's soul with 2 lightning bolts of speed and force, no matter what he heard in his previous life or fantasy novel. Soul injuries are obviously difficult to heal. And because of the soul-attached soul, the soul is injured, so there is no way to cast quirks. That's why they retaliated against him so crazily. Thinking of this, Li Tian's complexion also turned weird. He also didn't expect that although his 2 casual moves didn't kill the soul-possessing soul, they disabled the opponent by accident. However, this is also good. The other side's quirks, who is elusive, is really troublesome in Li Tian's eyes. If he hides and plots against him, then it will be a real trouble for him, not like it is now. It is almost obvious. By the way, the possessed soul still uses villain's information as a bargaining chip, and insists on meeting you, saying that it wants to positively identify you as the murderous villain, Savitar. The middle-aged police officer looked at Shang. Li Tian's expression became even weirder. Can you still play like this? Li Tian looked at the middle-aged police officer in a daze. Of course you can't identify. But I want to meet with you, and if you agree, I can make a video call, the middle-aged police officer said. Video call. Li Tian thought for a while before agreeing. After all, he is now a wronged little hero with a clear conscience. Seeing Li Tian agreeing, the middle-aged police officer's face was also filled with joy. Obviously, he also hoped that Li Tian would agree. After all, the police also want to know whether Li Tian and Savitar are ghost-possessed nonsense, or there is a real connection. The middle-aged police officer and the police on the side gave orders, and soon, when the police left and returned, they came over with a large slap instrument. The other party is in prison now, so naturally you can't just use your mobile phone for video connection. The middle-aged policeman explained to several people. Of course, the main thing was to explain to Li Tian. Except for Li Tian, everyone else present it's either a policeman or a professional hero. This kind of thing is basically clear even if you don't explain it. And Li Tian obviously doesn't care about this kind of thing. After the police on the side operated it, the instrument was projected directly in the air, with a black screen. Even if the instrument is changed, the sound of the call waiting to be answered remains the same. Laugh. The video is connected. On the other side, after Li Tian agreed, he was ready. In the picture, it is a small prison cell. The iron bars of the cell can be clearly seen. On the edge of the cell, you can also see a few policemen on duty, as well as professional hero. In the middle of the large prison cell was a chair, and the person tied to the chair was a young man who seemed to be around 20 years old. The young man's face was extremely pale. His eyes looked at this side. First he glanced at the one-punch professional hero and the police around Li Tian, and then stared at Li Tian closely. His eyes were full of resentment and banter. The young man, that is, the possessed soul, spoke. His voice was a little hoarse, but there was the same banter in his voice as his gaze. Didn't expect it. Our meeting this time is such a scene. Indeed, I didn't expect you to go to jail and still want to see me. Why? Do you want to personally thank me for abolishing your quirks and giving you a chance to change your ways? If that's the case, you don't have to thank me. It's what I should do. Li Tian raised his eyebrows and said. HMPH. Hearing Li Tian mentioning the quirks who had abolished him, the soul-possessed soul's face was filled with resentment, and he said sarcastically, Savitar, you should just play around now. Look at yourself well. There are 4 or 5 professional hero and a dozen or so policemen around. They are more closely guarded than my police station. I will wait for you inside. Then you can sleep in it. Li Tian sarcastically said with disdain, is it because my 2 minds have smashed your brain, and this kind of low-level accusation can be used? With a touch of lip to lip, people will believe what you say. Hey. Believe it or not, it doesn't count if I say it, and it doesn't count if you say it. After all, the identity of Savitar will become a stain that you can't wash off in this life. If you want to be hero, then I'll ruin your hero road, regret wearing a mask and come out to meddle in other people's business. Looking at Li Tian with resentment, he sneered. It's the nature of hero to meddle in other people's business. Besides, rumors of this level want to ruin my hero path. You think too much. Li Tian couldn't help but shook his head. You just wait in the prison, waiting to learn from the mouths of the progressive inmates whether my hero road has been destroyed by you. A few years. The ghost suddenly laughed, looking at the incomparable sarcasm in Li Tian's eyes. Do you think you still have a few years? You are spreading the news that you are Savita before. I naturally thought about the influence of villain's identity on the reliability of the information I provided, and I never expected that this could destroy you. This is just the first gift I gave you. Huh. Li Tian was taken aback for a moment, and looked at the soul-pouring eyes, and he also turned his attention a little squarely. He originally thought that the other party had become a lunatic after Quirks was destroyed. Slandering me is just the first gift, it's interesting, let's talk about it. Hey. The soul-possessed directly noticed the change in Li Tian's eyes and laughed. I think, including the professional hero and everyone in the police, they can't even imagine what I hold in my hand such power. When I was 15, I first started playing with Quirks. It's been 8 years now, although those things are just debugging products in the game process. But you can't even imagine how many things I have memorized in the past 8 years using my computer technology during the game. Accompanied by the narration of the possessed soul, the complexions of all the people present, including Li Tian, changed. No one is a fool, so naturally they can hear the meaning in the possessed soul's words. Countless secrets of villain organizations, secrets of professional hero, and even secrets of the government. I have kept all these things well. The soul-possessed sneered. Do you think that during the time I came back from my island, I just spread your identity as Savitar? No. I sorted out all the black materials of all villain organizations, big and small, and even professional hero, threatening they kill you, or kill Savitar. Hey, at this time, countless villain organizations are probably holding a meeting to plan to kill you. From today onwards, even if you just walk on the street, there will probably be countless killers aiming their guns at you. Any hero event at random may be a trick played by villain to kill you, and even every professional hero who is close to you may want to kill you when you are alone. I want you to live in endless fear from today, and I want you to be unable to sleep peacefully for the rest of your life. Now among the professional hero and the police next to you, there may be someone who wants to directly kill you. Ha ha ha. Being tied to an iron chair, the soul-possessed man laughed wildly. The police station over there kept echoing the venomous curses and laughter of the soul-possessed soul, but none of the policemen stepped forward to stop them. Almost everyone, the eyes of the people looking at the maniacally laughing ghost in the prison cell changed. Terrified. Terrified. Crazy. This guy is absolutely crazy. The eyes of almost everyone looking at the soul-possessed soul showed horror. As for Li Tian, his heart felt extremely heavy at this time. After all, although he was not a 15-year-old boy, he was only in his early 20s in his previous life. Facing this undisguised malice, unbearable. Maybe it was because of the tiredness of laughing. The possessed soul stopped laughing wildly, looked at Li Tian with a heavy face and showed a smug smile. Where is your confidence? Where is your calmness just now? And you let me wait in prison. Okay, then I'll just wait. Maybe it won't be long before I hear the news of your tragic death in this prison that looks like a railway under the protection of the police. Haha, police officer, as a thank you for letting me tell you all this, you can ask any questions you have. If you can answer, I will know everything. However, in exchange, you must protect me well. With a glance of soulful eyes, he looked at a high-level police station who was no longer in the camera, and said jokingly. I have just listened to the words before possessing the soul. Even as a seasoned old policeman, the feeling of being surrounded by villain everywhere, just thinking about it, makes people extremely horrified. But he opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. Since the villain have been caught and sentenced to prison, they will naturally need to keep them. Even because of the value of possessing souls, they still have key protection as needed. Villain. Beside, All Might suddenly swelled up, and re-emerged as the muscular form of countless villain demons. His extremely sharp eyes directly penetrated the screen, staring at the attached demon over there. Soul, if you think that hero can be destroyed by such despicable means, then you are totally wrong. As soon as All Might's eyes were fixed on him, the soul possessed instincts and he was startled. All Might, there is no doubt that this is a big mountain on the head of all the villain in Neon, even if he has fallen now, but the prestige is still there. All Might. A symbol of peace. The #1 hero. If it was before the Kano incident, I'd really be afraid of you, but now. You're just a useless piece of trash. The possessed soul immediately sneered after reacting. What do you think you can do with your current body? Protect that guy. I'm afraid you are walking on the street now, wanting to kill your villain. You don't need that guy much less. Young Li Tian. All Might ignored the ghost, but stood up and walked to Li Tian's side. Li Tian couldn't help but looked up at All Might. The more uneasy and frightened you are, the more you should smile. All Might patted Li Tian's shoulder, with that reassuring, familiar smile on his face. Looking at All Might in front of him, Li Tian's expression froze. Uneasy? Was he uneasy just now? Afraid? Could he feel scared? Yes. He will be uneasy, he will also be afraid, because he is also a human being, but... The uneasiness on Li Tian's face gradually dissipated, and the corners of his mouth were once again calm, his eyes were extremely bright, and he thought of All Might's song in his mind, that sentence. The so-called hero are those who can overcome adversity at any time. Li Tian's voice was not loud, but it was enough to make the surroundings and the ghosts opposite the camera hear clearly. On the side, the smile on All Might's face suddenly became wider, and the teachers of Shangying on the side also showed a smile. The middle-aged police officer and the policeman on the side looked at Li Tian with admiration. Thinking in another way, they subconsciously put themselves on Li Tian's seat just now. Even a middle-aged police officer would have to admit that he couldn't do it, couldn't do the calmness on Li Tian's face, and couldn't even pretend arrive. Over there, the possessed soul does not believe that Li Tian can face all this calmly, even if he is really calm now. But as long as you experience one or two incidents, you will inevitably be in panic and panic all day long. HMPH, let's see how long you can be brave. The possessed soul sneered. 8:20 in the evening. Occupation Hero Group Pussycat's private forest territory. A figure came out of a hidden mountain cave. If any teachers from Class A or Shangying were here, they would definitely recognize this figure as Li Tian, who should have been taken away to assist in the investigation. It's time. Li Tian walked out of the fan and whispered softly while looking at the dark night. He was a clone created by Li Tian immediately after seeing the news in the early morning. And this is also the way he thought of breaking the situation after he was recognized by the soul-possessed soul on my island. Although he didn't know how the soul-possessed soul would retaliate or reveal Savitar's identity, but nothing compares to him. The clone ability, which has been kept secret, is an easier way to break the game. No one would have imagined that Li Tian, a speed quirks, would use this ability to deal with clones. This is why Li Tian has always believed that his ability is the speed force after the inspection on my island, not the super speed quirks born from his parents' quirks. Looking at the dark night that has already fallen and the bright moon hanging high in the sky, Li Tian's speed force flashed in his eyes, and he immediately activated the speed force and ran towards the direction of Kyoto. During the day when Savitar's identity was recognized, Li Tian couldn't guarantee that there would be no witnesses who would discover his existence. After all, with the billions of quirks in this society, who knows if there will be one or two weird ones who will be caught by him. He met. After being discovered by villain and professional hero about his identity as Savitar, he is now extremely distrustful of his luck. With Li Tian's current speed, although the capital is a little far away, he arrived at the place where he hid Savitar's armor in just a few minutes. Looking at the Savitar armor that he had left for a while, Li Tian couldn't help feeling a little emotional. He had almost chosen to give up the identity of Savitar before. This Savitar armor, if it wasn't for commemoration, and the need to guard against the possible revenge of the soul, I am afraid that he will cruelly discard this armor completely. Li Tian caressed the cold steel armor and sighed in his heart. He spent a lot of time knocking out this Savitar armor. Including the design of the armor, as well as the learning of some simple structures and castings, it would take even longer. If it weren't for the super fast learning speed and the increase in hands-on speed of the speed force mode, I'm afraid it would be a year for Li Tian. It is not necessarily possible to create it. Perhaps this is the last time wearing him. Li Tian sighed in his heart. Of course, as the avatar at this moment, he still doesn't know what happened in the main body during the day, otherwise, he wouldn't say such words. Whoosh! A burst of dazzling golden light flickered, and in just a split second, Li Tian put the heavy Savitar courtyard armor on his body. Rapid mode, 10 times. Turn on. A faint blue light flickered from the gaps in the armor. Hero from darkness, Savitar, come, Kyoto City. As the most active area in Savitar, the residents here are also very concerned about the report during the day. It can be said that they are not inferior to Osaka City, the city where the Osaka Bay incident occurred. On the streets and alleys, many people can still be heard discussing about Savitar. But, after all, this is not a peaceful world, but a chaotic world where all kinds of criminal villain are like crucian carp crossing the river. Therefore, the people here, at any rate, still have their own brains. A piece of news about a hacker villain is not enough to convince them all, especially in the end. the news that Sawada might be a certain student in the first-year hero department of Shangying High School makes many people scoffed. Especially after the police caught the soul-possessed soul, they urgently released the news that the mastermind of this incident has been captured. Villain was captured by Hero, a freshman in Shangying High School, during a villain operation. The accidental organization of the students in class was villain who took revenge with personal grudges. Therefore, only a small part will focus on the first grade of the hero department of Shangying High School, and the focus of most of the discussions is still on the Savitar and Osaka Bay incidents. Some people think that Savitar saved thousands of trafficked women. He is undoubtedly a hero. As for the death and injury of villain, many people hold an attitude of indifference. Even many radical young and middle-aged people clap their hands in celebration. No matter in that era, human traffickers have always been spurned, especially in the pictures of the police report. It was mentioned that the villain organization was arresting its own nationals and trafficking them abroad, which is even more so let most people think that the death of those people is not a pity. However, there are also a small number of people who think that although Savitar's actions were done by Hero, but he does not have a hero license to use quirks to fight, that is a violation of the law, and he was judged as a villain. There is no error either. This scene is exactly what the Freedom Jihad army behind the scenes wants to see, and what the government absolutely does not want to see. As for Li Tian's incarnation of Savitar, at this time, he is naturally not aware of these situations, but he just walked around his usual activity area twice, caught a few small Mang thieves, and was given by several people blocked. Li Tian had just opened his mouth, but he hadn't finished a sentence. We are allies. Huang Mao on the opposite side directly raised his hand and shouted, and the other three also raised their hands to show that they were not hostile. Friendly army. Li Tian looked at these people a little strangely. Official people? Not like that. Except for the yellow hair, the three of them were all wearing all kinds of exotic clothes, and they also wore masks and helmets to cover their faces. That's right, we are allies. The yellow hair shouted quickly, we are also underground hero who have not obtained a hero license to carry out hero activities like your excellency. Underground hero. Li Tian was slightly taken aback, looking at the four people on the opposite side, with a look of surprise in his eyes. Could it be that the underground hero have joined together to form a team these days? He is just a fake underground hero, and it is not very clear about this kind of thing. What do you want from me? Li Tian asked while vibrating the hoarse voice of the vocal cord imitator. Well, we want to invite His Excellency Savitar to join us, the leading yellow hair said. Sorry, I'm not interested in joining any organization, Li Tian said coldly. The yellow-haired man wanted to speak, but was interrupted directly by Li Tian. If you have nothing else to do, just get out of the way. I have something tonight. We know this. We just read that post and guessed that Your Excellency will appear here today, so we are here waiting for Your Excellency. Since the big boss doesn't want to join us, we don't force it. This book is to echo our public opinion. Hero reading material. After reading it, if you agree with us, you can contact us. The yellow hair looked at Li Tian's expression, and after throwing a book to Li Tian, he was decisive turn around and leave. Seeing the backs of those four people leaving, Li Tian snorted softly. The underground hero team is an unknown villain organization.
When he is stupid. The main purpose of his visit to Kyoto this time is to attract the attention of the officials and explain something, so there is not much concealment in his actions.
Although being able to stop him faster than the official does not mean that the opponent is stronger than the official, it is definitely not something that a small underground hero team can do. Li Tian glanced at the red book, Supernatural Liberation Front, in his hand and threw it aside. This book, because he called quirks a supernatural power, he accidentally read it once. But he just read it for a while and he didn't read it anymore. The basic skeleton of this book is probably to abolish the quirks management laws of various countries in the world at this time, and let people use quirks in public places as everyone's right to freedom. Break the law. From this point of view, some of Li Tian's actions actually coincide with the ideas in this book, but the most fundamental reason why Li Tian discarded this book was because he saw the marrow hidden in the so-called skeleton of the book's so-called liberal use of quirks, the real intention of the book. That is to establish a unique the world of power. Ability. That is, the strength or weakness of quirks will determine a person's status, social rank, and even a person's life and death. In this book, this kind of thinking is very vaguely mentioned, which made Li Tian immediately give up the idea of continuing to read, and even made him snort. How stupid it is to abandon the more advanced and better civilization model and choose to return to the backward era that has been swept into the corner of history. Without even looking at the book on the ground, Li Tian's incarnation of Savitar flew straight away, waiting for his real target to appear tonight. Not long after Li Tian left, those people who blocked Li Tian just now returned here again. It seems that this Savitar is very cautious. The yellow-haired man looked at the books that were thrown aside, stepped forward to pick them up and said helplessly, he won't even take away a book that looks ordinary. It's about being cautious. No, if he's purely cautious, he won't even touch the book. After you throw the book, he will avoid it instead of catching it. He is disdainful, another person said sighed. Disdain. A sharp voice questioned, you mean he disdains the contents of the book? That's right. The person who spoke just now sighed, and took out an eyeball and an ear from a remote corner of the rooftop. After taking off the helmet, the other party really had one eye and one ear, and after putting the eyes and ears back, the man continued, after we left, that Savitar didn't read the book, but just read the book. One glance at the title of the book and it was thrown aside. That gesture is obviously not vigilant, but disdainful. However, I don't know whether he read the content of the book or feels disdainful towards us. No matter who it is. This guy is no longer worth recruiting, report it. The yellow-haired man was silent for a while, and then said in a deep voice. Here, the scene after he left. Li Tian naturally wouldn't know about it, but now he finally met his target tonight. From the official manpower. It was still the same group they met last time, and the conversation between Li Tian's disguised Savitar and the other party was also very smooth. He also announced that he was only here to clarify dazzling, and that he himself was ready to give up the not-so-honorable career of underground hero. When Li Tian finished speaking, he could even see the look of surprise on the other party's face. As the candidates to contact Savitar, they have been informed of all the pros and cons of Savitar in the Osaka Bay incident beforehand, and some of the barriers, even Li Tian himself can't think of it. Although it was Li Tian who proposed it on his own initiative, there is absolutely no way for them to lose a share of the credit. Looking at the back of Savitar leaving. Are you sure he is Savitar? One of the officials suddenly said in a deep voice. Sure. He is the Savitar we met last time. A person stepped forward to confirm. Is that so? The man looked at Savitar in the distance and pondered. It seems that some villain is really talking nonsense, and that student has nothing to do with Savitar. Hey, boss, we have already said that no student can be from Savitar, a 15-year-old student boy, no matter how good Quirks is, it is absolutely impossible to be a fierce character like Savitar. Aside, someone said with a smile. Yeah. The man nodded, let's report it. Which student? You can let him go after the notarization meeting is over. On the other hand, after clarifying with the official, although Li Tian turned around and left directly, it was the last time to be active in the dark as Savitar, so Li Tian naturally wouldn't end it so easily. But as Savitar, the last activity is a commemoration. After all, Li Tian's avatar technique is not a clone in the traditional sense, but a physical afterimage created by the Speed Force's interference with time. Therefore, as long as Li Tian doesn't take the initiative or the avatar dissipates on its own initiative, then the avatar and the main body are generally the same. Scream for help. Li Tian, who was leaping on the roof, heard the faint cry for help coming from his ears, his heart moved, and his feet turned to Shi, who was calling for help and rushed over. This is a small alley that is not too far away. One side is connected to the bustling main road, while the other side requires 2 turns to get to the main road. Not surprisingly, there is a small gangster in the alley robbing a close overtime white-collar workers on the way home. Li Tian has encountered this kind of thing 80 times if not 100 times, and he is no stranger to it for a long time. After all, there are always people who will take a shortcut and walk into this kind of desolation at night with the idea that luck is not so bad. Trail. Li Tian, who was familiar with the process, directly rushed over without even saying hello, and directly knocked down the robbing gangster and knocked him out. As for the rescued white-collar worker, he is Savitar, not a professional hero, so naturally he doesn't need to come forward to comfort him. And it took only a second or two from Li Tian's quick appearance to the solution. The ordinary white-collar worker hadn't reacted at this time, and his face was still stiff with panic. The little gangster on the ground, praying in his heart, ran out of the alley in a hurry. But Li Tian knocked down the little gangster and left directly. This kind of gangster is very smart. When he robs, he basically chooses students or white-collar workers who don't look strong, and basically they don't know how to use quirks to rob. This simple crime can be caught by the police or professional hero too, basically will not be sentenced to any felony. Therefore, Li Tian has long been used to just stunning the other party, and then saving the party and then leaving. As for whether to call the police or leave, It depends on the person concerned, and Li Tian will not care about it. Silently walking through the buildings that were not too tall, Li Tian continued his last patrol. I don't know what's going on with the main body now. Li Tian thought to himself, if the distance between him and the main body is very close, the experience between them can indeed be shared, but the two of them are silent gang. One is in Kyoto. The distance of hundreds of kilometers between them far exceeds the distance between them. However, according to his thinking, among the people who met the official just now, there should be someone who can confirm that he is Savitar, and the news should have been sent back by now, and the troubles on the main body should have been resolved. But, as a clone created in the early hours of this morning, he has no idea how serious the things he experienced later on in his own body, and even now he still doesn't know that the possessed soul has been arrested. Together again. In Li Tian's ears came the similar cry for help again, which made Li Buku sigh with emotion. As expected of a big city like Kyoto, there are a lot of crimes. Li Tian heard the faint cries for help coming from his ears, moved his feet, and rushed in the direction of the cries for help. This time, it was a very remote alley. But this time, it was 4 or 5 punks from the user quirks who blocked a girl who looked young. The gangsters this time are obviously more courageous than the one just now, but they lack experience. Not only did they use quirks to rob, but they seemed to have malicious intentions. Instinctively, Li Tian felt that something was wrong with the scene in front of him. However, the situation was a little urgent, but he didn't have time to think about it. In an instant, a series of afterimages of blue light were drawn, and Li Tian rushed out of the middle between the woman and the gangster, blocking the while catching the little gangster's malicious right hand. He directly subdued him one after another with his backhand. Everyone. Your ideas are dangerous. Savitar's deep voice sounded. At this time, the other 3 gangsters looked at Savitar, who suddenly appeared in a fierce armor, and looked at each other at the same time, and then rushed towards Li Tian at the same time. All kinds of quirks are used in an instant. One is a husky, that's wrong. A werewolf quirks. One is a quirks whose right arm instantly turns into a spring, and the other is a quirks whose body instantly becomes extremely slender like a rope and is looped towards Savitar. The arm of the mantis is like a cart. Li Tian snorted coldly, looked at the 3 people rushing over, grabbed out with his right hand, directly grabbed the gangster whose body was turned into a rope, and then shook it up and down with all his strength. Directly unloaded the opponent's strength completely. Then he took advantage of the situation and swung at the husky that was rushing over, and at the same time, he directly bombarded with his left hand, and the quick, precise and ruthless fist directly imprinted on the husky's abdomen, and flew out with the rope. As for the last gangster whose right hand turned into a spring and punched, Li Tian just moved his foot slightly, then dodged sideways, grabbed the spring arm with his left hand and pulled it, raised his right knee, and directly flew him out. Vulnerable. Li Tian looked at the 4 felled gangsters, the look of disdain flashed in his eyes, he kicked his feet suddenly, his whole body flew into the air, and a backflip landed directly on the blocked gangster. Live behind the woman. The position where Li Tian was just now was hit by a hard-to-find transparent ripple under the night, and a violent explosion occurred. And the one who launched the attack is undoubtedly the woman who was blocked just now. Damn it. The woman looked at Li Tian, who disappeared in front of her eyes, and panic flashed across her face. Before this attack, they knew how powerful the target was this time, and she alone was far from it. Opponent. Unexpected sneak attack missed, waiting for his solution. It's over. Even though she is not injured now, she already feels hopeless in her heart. Tell me. Who are you? Li Tian looked at the flustered woman in front of him and asked in a deep voice. We are. The woman showed hesitation on her face, and she was about to speak, but standing in front of the woman, Li Tian in the Sa-Waitar armor suddenly changed his face, his heart suddenly became extremely flustered, a feeling of heart palpitations rushed directly to his brain, and his scalp was constantly numb. Dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Subconsciously, Li Tian immediately opened up his speed and force, and the whole world stopped suddenly. About 10 meters behind Savitar, a yellow-orange finger-long bullet was slowly flying towards Li Tian. He didn't look back at all, but left the position just now in an instant. And it was less than 1/10 of a second before Li Tian got out of the way. Beep. There was a muffled sound that wasn't too loud. This is. Li Tian was startled. Sniper rifle. In speed. Force mode. Li Tian saw a big hole in the chest of the woman in front of him just now. Blood was flowing continuously, and before he could even show any expression on his face, blood gushed out of his mouth, but there was only a sound when his mouth opened and closed. It didn't come out, and the eyes gradually lost their clarity. Damn it. Li Tian's face was filled with incomparable anger. He naturally wouldn't think that the shooter was sniping that woman. If he hadn't flashed so fast just now, that shot would definitely blow his head off. Someone shot me. In the alley, Li Tian directly stepped on the sidewall and flipped several times in a row, then turned his head to look at the direction where the bullet came. Under the dark night, even with Li Tian's eyesight at this time, it is impossible to see a hidden sniper through hundreds of meters, but Li Tian's brain is calculating at high speed, quickly calculating from the trajectory of the bullet just now get out of the sniper's position. On the roof of a building. Although it is only a clone, this is the first time Li Tian in this life is so close to death. He is just a clone. Even if he dies, it will not cause the death of the main body, but as the time remnant of the main body, if he dies and disappears, the main body will definitely cause serious damage. Li Tian's gaze was incomparably cold, and he rushed towards the sniper directly. Although he has never experienced this kind of thing before, Li Tian also knows that when facing a sniper, standing in a daze or rushing directly is definitely the most stupid behavior. Li Tian stepped forward with a zigzag step. At this moment, Li Tian didn't use the super speed force mode that erupted just now. At full speed, Li Tian's speed was even faster than the bullets of a sniper rifle. But the body is in rapid recovery mode. With dynamic vision and reaction speed in this state, it is impossible to hit Li Tian with a sniper rifle. In the toilet on the top floor of a tall building, a young man cursed angrily. As an excellent sniper, it stands to reason that the most basic quality is to be able to keep calm at all times, but this time, no matter how calm he is, he wants to scold his mother and jump his feet. Who the F*K has seen a sniper rifle bullet 10 meters away from a person before reacting and then disappearing to hide? In particular, his bullets still pass through his quirk's boost, and the speed is almost twice as fast as before. That guy has already discovered it. The young man cursed in his heart. He didn't believe that someone could react from a distance of 10 meters and dodge a sniper bullet with a bullet speed approaching more than 3,000 meters per second. Although he was cursing in his heart, the young sniper quickly calmed down and aimed again. This was their specially chosen sniper location. It was more than 600 meters away from the alley, and there were hardly any obstacles in the middle. If you want to run over, except for taking a long way, then you have to go straight. And if you charge head-on, that's the target of his sniping. Call. The sniper slowed down his breathing, looking at the figure in the sniper scope who was just walking forward with a simple, zigzag, cloth. A look of solemnity flashed in his eyes. This kind of walking is only for the most junior sniper. For him it's not difficult at all, but I can't stand his speed. It took less than a second to disappear directly from his sniper scope. The speed at which he aimed his moving gun couldn't keep up with the opponent at all. Can it only be predicted? The sniper quickly began to calculate the speed of Li Tian's advance. Snapped. 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 The young sniper fired shots one after another. The silencer on the sniper rifle made the sound of the shots extremely weak, and the bullet casings fell to the ground one after another. However, frustrated, still fail. How could it be? The young sniper's face froze, looking through the sniper mirror at Savitar, who was walking irregularly in a zigzag, but the speed increased and decreased at will, and he perfectly avoided the sniper attacks. Bullet. If it is said that just dodging one is luck, and just dodging two is luck against the sky, then if you happen to dodge 3, 4 or even more, can you stop respecting the bullet so much and don't let him fly for a while longer? Sniping doesn't work on that guy. The young sniper took a deep breath and forcibly calmed down. Seeing Savitar, who was still zigzag and approaching at a fast speed, he didn't stop, and directly throwing the gun in his hand aside, he walked out of the private room of the toilet and prepared to leave. Huh. Stop shooting? Li Tian looked at the sniper position. His eyes flashed coldly. Did you find that sniping is useless to me? Originally, with his current dynamic vision and reaction speed, he didn't need to take Z steps to dodge at all, just to paralyze the sniper and let him stay for a few more seconds. Only using the rapid mode, it will take about 7 seconds to rush from the position just now to the sniper point on the roof. If the opponent turns his head and walks away, these 7 seconds are enough for the opponent to leave calmly, and it is just a simple Z. Even if he didn't walk in a straight line to extend the route, it would only take a few tenths of a second longer. Call. Li Tian's heart moved, and he directly used the super speed force mode, which didn't increase the speed too much, but only increased it to 15 times the speed, and rushed out. Originally, it would take 4 or 5 seconds to arrive, but now it takes just over 2 seconds. Li Tian has already arrived at the downstairs of the building, but he didn't go in. Li Tian directly raised his feet and took a few steps on the wall. Grabbing the windowsill and pulling it hard, the whole person flew straight up. In less than a second, Li Tian appeared directly at the toilet window on the 9th floor where Gathering Hands was. Looking at the guns thrown away in the toilet, Li Tian went in through the window without the slightest hesitation, and then quickly appeared in the corridor outside the toilet. Li Tian looked back and forth, but there was no one in the corridor. Moreover, the lights in many rooms are still on. Obviously there are not many people on this floor. I just don't know if it was arranged by the group who ambushed and assassinated him, or if there are really so many people working overtime here. Li Tian stood in the corridor, his eyes flashed, and then he quickly glanced at the doors of 2 or 3 rooms near the toilet. Although the lights were on, there were not many people working overtime inside, and everyone was busy in front of the computer. No. Li Tian suddenly understood in his heart. The sniper rifle just now was lightweight, with a bullet speed of at most 1,000 meters, but the bullets he encountered just now were each close to 3,000, faster than he is running now, so it is very easy to judging. That's sniper's quirks. From the time the other party stopped to feel this place, it took Li Tian no more than 3 seconds at most, if he wasn't in 2 or 3 nearby rooms, that is. Opposite the men's toilet, Li Tian walked in without the slightest hesitation. Really. The door of the compartment closest to the door was not closed at this time, and a man's hand was still on the door of the compartment. Whoosh. Li Tian rushed over directly, and quickly captured the astonished sniper. Glancing at the various costume props in the toilet cubicle, Li Tian sneered directly. After gathering, women dressed up and escaped. He had seen this routine countless times in movies and novels in his previous life. Carrying the sniper who was constantly resisting, Li Tian jumped out of the window, turned over with one hand, and went directly from the top floor to the rooftop, throwing it away. Speak up. Who are you? Why are you ambush me? Li Tian asked in a deep voice. The young sniper felt the cold and sharp steel fingertips brushing across his cheeks, and instinctively trembled all over. But then there was a look of death in his eyes, and he looked at Savitar with resentment. You will die, will definitely die. Ah. Huh. Suicide? Li Tian was taken aback. A chill flashed in the eyes of the sniper who tilted his head and lost his breath. If the assassination fails, commit suicide directly. This is definitely not what ordinary villain do. Could it be the organization from last time? Li Tian thought of the human trafficker villain organization that he massacred in Osaka Bay last time, but immediately shook his head. In the last battle, Li Tian almost destroyed more than half of the opponent's elite, and the rest of the police and professional hero followed suit, not to mention cleaning up all of them, but they definitely would not have the energy to seek revenge on him. Is it Silver Fox? Li Tian thought of the international villain organization, the buyer of the Insaka incident. It was the group who did it just now. Li Tian thought of the few people who blocked him before the official. After thinking for a while, Li Tian shook his head and didn't think much about it. Apart from this matter, Li Tian didn't have any intention of continuing to carry out the hero activities. Head away. The dark man is defeated. In a hidden place, a man with an owl head similar to Tokiyami frowned. Both Sonic and Sniper are dead. In front of him, a young man respectfully said, Boss, do you want to target Savitar? No need. Owl shook his head, and turned his head directly to look at the scenery outside the window behind him, which Savitar is rarely haunted recently. It's just a gamble tonight, and I want to find him in the future. That would be difficult, if you keep an eye on him. Why don't you find some student boy? But that student is Shangying. The young man hesitated a little. Shangying High School, as a banner of the Hero Society, the professional hero cultivated every year can be called the elite among the elite. For so many years, one after another, the number exceeds 1,000. If you offend the other party, the consequences would be unimaginable. What's the matter with Shangying? He's just a student. Kill him if he kills him. Make a plan. Owl snorted coldly and said in a deep voice. Yes. The young man responded. Looking at the owl's determination, he knew that there was no way to change the other party's decision. After the young man left, the expressionless face of the owl in the room instantly became extremely ferocious. Damn Savitar, damn student, damn hero, damn ghost. Why don't you all die? The owl roared angrily, his eyes were scarlet, like a raging beast. After a long time, the ferociousness on the owl's face gradually subsided, and the eyes also returned to clarity. That possessed soul must die. The owl gritted its teeth and squeezed out these words. Calculations flashed in its eyes. It is definitely not an easy task to kill the soul possessed by the police who are now in prison, especially after the police track down. That is the real trouble. But He's not alone. At this very moment, in cities all over the country, the leaders of hundreds of secret villain organizations have said these words through gritted teeth. And this scene was not unexpected. When he made that choice, he already knew the consequences. This is also the reason why he was easily caught by the police. In order to obtain the strong protection of the police, let the group of crazy villain turn their targets from him to Li Tian. After that night in Kyoto, Li Tian's suspicion of being Savitar has been cleared. Of course, the most important thing is that Savitar's identity, whether it is Li Tian or not, is of no benefit to the officials. Naturally, no one will hold on to it, otherwise, the matter would not have ended so easily. Afterwards, there was a simple police press conference. The police, Xiangying's teachers and All Might jointly proved that Li Tian did not leave Xiangying's campus when Savita appeared in Kyoto City. This result was also reported by the police on the internet promoted it. But this time, Li Tian is definitely famous. Young man Li Tian, here. At the gate of Xiangying High School, All Might handed over the documents he had prepared in advance and left. This is. Li Tian was startled and subconsciously took the certificate. Occupational Hero Temporary License. Li Tian looked at the id in his hand in astonishment. With this, at least you can use quirks to counterattack independently when you encounter villain. All Might said in a deep voice, this is the only help I can give you now. Li Tian looked at the serious All Might and grinned, that's enough. It's enough to have these. Li Tian grinned as he looked at All Might, who was a bit self-blaming. Of course Li Tian knew why All Might blamed himself. He had to know that he went to my island because of the invitation of All Might and Melissa. But Li Tian doesn't think so. Although it was an invitation from All Might and Melissa to go to my island, it was also what he wanted to go. As for the attack on the possessed soul, it was his own choice. The path he chose, the offended villain, Li Tian, why should he blame other people? The more dangerous you are, the more you have to smile. Isn't this what you taught me, All Might? Li Tian had a wide smile on his face. Young Li Tian. All Might was taken aback. Looking at Li Tian who was still smiling calmly, a look of worry flashed in his eyes. For Li Tian, he, the police, and other teachers of Xiangying were all surprisingly consistent in their views. The current calmness is only because he has not experienced those things yet, and he must know that what was revealed to Li Tian in the joking words with the soul is definitely not a joke. That kind of scene, even if it is All Might, makes one feel horrified just thinking about it. And after all, Li Tian is just a 15-year-old Xiaohui. All Might looked at Li Tian and felt powerless in his heart. If he can still fight, he can protect Li Tian from the wind and rain, but now, Li Tian, a 15-year-old boy, must bear it alone. As for the others, including Xiangying's teacher, there is no professional hero who can stay by Li Tian's side all the time. After all, they are professional hero, not Li Tian's personal bodyguards. Therefore, he saved face and applied to the police for a temporary license, allowing Li Tian to use quirks to fight back or escape. But, thinking about it this way, All Might's eyes became more self-blaming. Seeing the self-blame in All Might's eyes, Li Tian couldn't help being a little dumbfounded, but also very moved. He himself doesn't care anymore, but All Might is always on his mind. Maybe this is one of the reasons why All Might can become a symbol of peace. Love to meddle in other people's business. But, this time, for Li Tian, it was really not as dangerous as All Might imagined. Hearing what the ghost said was scary, but after thinking about it carefully, Li Tian just felt like laughing. Countless villain organizations are discussing how to deal with him. They are discussing how to give him credit. Walking on the street, countless killers point their guns at him. Stand in front of the group of people and let them scan with machine guns and blink their eyelids one look and Li Tian is not a man. Bullets don't fly as fast as he can run, there's a fart for that. As for the hero activity that villain set up for him, the endless stream of villain is absolutely wishful thinking. As for the professional hero who wanted to sneak attack and kill him, then Li Tian dared to go to the police station to ask for a few penance in the name of helping the general public pick out some scum. Here and there is an attempt to assassinate Li Tian. This is clearly training him, honing his spirit. All the tribulations that can't hit him will make leaving stronger. And all of this is based on Li Tian's absolute confidence in his own strength. Besides, Li Tian also wouldn't believe that the possessed soul has the ability to make those villain organizations willing to risk all their lives to kill him, just because of a little slander and threat. Those vicious villain organizations will be killed. How can it be possible to come out and die continuously? As long as Li Tian can beat up those villains severely, and the hurting opponents dare not come to provoke him, that threat is just a joke. For example, if the protagonist of this incident is changed from Li Tian to the former All Might, is there any villain organization that dares to stroke All Might's beard because of the threat of some black material and seek death? Maybe those villain organizations would rather endure the risk of exposure and go to the prison to secretly destroy the soul-possessed mouth than to provoke All Might. And Li Tian thinks that his current strength, even if compared to All Might in its heyday, will definitely not be inferior. That's right, Li Tian suddenly thought of something, and asked, All Might, if this temporary license is won by villain, will the official grant bonuses like professional hero? Then how many villain came to die on their own initiative? If there is no money, then wouldn't I lose money? All Might stared at Li Tian, who looked like he was bewildered by money, and there was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Xiangying, other teachers and police officers were also dumbfounded. They're still worried about it. Dude, you've already used those villain as cash machines. No. The middle-aged police officer on the side said angrily. Being able to apply for a temporary license without an assessment is all for the sake of All Might, and the salary for becoming a full-time employee is just a dream. The police cannot afford the crime of employing child labor hero. Be stingy. Li Tian curled his lips. Although he already knew that temporary workers have no human rights, when he thought that he might have to hand over dozens or even hundreds of villain to the police for free as a free labor, Li Tian felt uncomfortable. Heartache. Let's go. Li Tian curled his lips, activated the speed force, and instantly disappeared into everyone's eyes in a flash of golden light. Looking at the scene in front of them, apart from All Might and Xiangying's teachers who were familiar with Li Tian, the other police officers, whether they were middle-aged police officers or other police officers, were a little stunned. The middle-aged police officer seemed to suddenly understand why Li Tian didn't take the threat of the possessed soul seriously. Even All Might and Xiangying's teachers didn't worry too much about Li Tian's safety between the lines, they just worried about it. This incident will affect Li Tian's future education. Middle-aged police officer. Meow. The camp of Xiangying High School's forest training camp. In the forest, Li Tian and Li Tian met. There is no need to speak, at such a close distance, Li Tian's speed force avatar can already share his timeline directly with Li Tian, appearing in his memory. Damn it. It's coming so soon. Li Tian looked at the memories that emerged in his mind, especially the memory of the life and death line, and felt a little scared in his heart. It never occurred to him that during the day he heard the threat from the possessed soul, and at night the avatar experienced an assassination. But the villain did mental calculations that time. His avatar is not aware of the matter of possessing souls, otherwise, if he knew, it would definitely not be so thrilling. But this is also a wake-up call to Li Tian. Although his speed force is strong, when he is not using it, he is still a mortal, with a mortal body, let alone a gun, a knife can kill him. Be careful, be careful. After canceling the clone, Li Tian silently remembered the lesson of this clone. At the same time, Li Tian also had some regrets. The world of Woying he lives in is a world of supernatural awakening, not a world with a complete cultivation system. Otherwise, with the learning ability of super speed force and super fast training ability, even if it is only the internal strength of a low-level martial arts world, Li Tian can give him thousands of years of skill, and then turn it into a novel of cultivating immortals. Cough cough. Aha. On the barren mountain surrounded by endless mountains and forests, the students of the two classes Ab and Hero are all working hard to hone their quirks. The so-called exercise of quirks is to keep using your quirks to the limit, and then break through the limit. If they were still thinking about other things in the first 2 days, then after a few days of torture, tempering, basically none of them had any thoughts about other things, and all they could think about was training quirks and exercising their bodies. And the result is quite remarkable. Li Tian sat cross-legged on the top of the barren hill and silently watched the scene of everyone exercising below. However, compared to his familiar classmates, Li Tian was obviously more interested in the unknown quirks of the students in Class B beside him. Li Tian watched all the weird quirks with gusto. For example, like Hong and Yaoyorozuan, it is recommended to enroll in the bone-pulling soft body, which can soften the things it touches. The softest one can even soften the steel on the ground like water. There is also the whirling element. Any part of the body can rotate at high speed like a drill. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party was a mortal body, then quirks' destructive power would be quite terrifying. And the welding quirks, if you want Li Tian to say, what kind of hero are those quirks? To be a senior welder, a proper senior talent, hard work, earning $1 million a month is not a dream. Huh? Li Tian? Suddenly, a voice sounded from behind Li Ti. Yo. Kaminari, you've recovered. Li Tian turned around and greeted Kaminari with a smile. I'm sorry, it's really you. When did you come back? Kaminari stepped forward and asked excitedly. When they learned that Li Tian was taken away by the police for investigation, they were shocked, especially the news that Li Tian was Savitar was uploaded on the internet, which made them almost worried to death. It's been a while since I've been back. However, you ran out of battery just now, so I didn't say hello to you. Li Tian laughed casually, but Kaminari, your recovery speed from the strong mode is much faster now. Stronger mode? What do you mean? Kaminari was at a loss and couldn't understand. It's a new One Punch Man comic on the market. The strong man in it has a very similar expression to yours. Li Tian blinked and pretended to be innocent and said. Really? Then I'll have to take a good look at it when I get home. Okay. I won't bother you to exercise, I'll go to Mrs. Aizawa first. Bye. Li Tian waved his hand and left the mountain in a hurry. And Kaminari walked towards the motor to continue training, but he couldn't help laughing in his head. The strong man in the comics is very similar to him. He looks very excited when he hears it. He, Kaminari Denki, has finally been drawn into the manga and has become synonymous with the great hero. I've heard everything. Aizawa Shota frowned and looked at Li Tian. Can it be done? No problem at all. Li Tian was full of confidence. A mere soul-possessed soul plus a group of stinky sweet potato villain who don't know where they come from, want to threaten him, kill him, and dream of their spring and autumn dream. Well, I won't ask about this matter, go to training. You have wasted 2 days, and I have to find a way to make it up for you. Aizawa Shota said, thinking carefully. Train. Seeing Aizawa Shota who was thinking about it, Li Tian suddenly felt a little flustered. Wouldn't it be the same kind of training that ran for more than 10 hours on the first day, so boring that it exploded, but it turned out to be of little use? That Aizawa-sensei. I can feel that my quirks seems to have a new breakthrough, so I apply for my own training these 2 days. Li Tian said hastily, raising his hand. A new breakthrough? Aizawa Shota frowned and looked at Li Tian. Are you sure? Yeah. Li Tian nodded repeatedly. Then. You go. Aizawa Shota nodded after thinking for a while. But don't forget the basic training. For you, running for 3 hours a day is the minimum. Yes. Li Tian quickly agreed. Running for 3 hours is not much more comfortable than running for 13 disappearances. Then I'll go first, teacher. Saying that, Li Tian turned into a golden red light and shadow in a whoosh, and quickly disappeared into the forest. And watching Li Tian's disappearing figure, Aizawa Shota's mouth twitched, revealing a mischievous smile. Hey, Eraserhead, you are as bad as ever. On the other side of the camp, a North American short-hair cat not far away laughed. Obviously the training plan originally arranged for Li Tian was only a 2-hour-long distance run. It was abruptly increased to 3 hours. 2 hours was the previous training intensity. Now that he is training on his own, he needs to train for 3 hours. Aizawa Shota said with a snort. Slightly. Obviously, the training intensity of running for an hour a day has reached the limit of growth, and adding an hour to run in with quirks is enough. You are not ashamed when you talk, said the North American short-hair cat. He grimaced and walked towards the training ground. He just came here to listen to Li Tian's report for Pussycat. After all, they are students who are training here, and they still have a lot of doubts about Savitar. See if they can know something. Student workouts are also inseparable from her quirks. Watching the North American short-hair leave, Aizawa Shota snorted twice. You guys know a hammer. It's not easy to have a monster with unlimited physical strength. It's not perfect. If you don't hone it well, are you worthy of those bowls of white rice? Aizawa Shota turned around and walked towards the camp, holding an A4 paper with the training plan for everyone in class in his hand. If Li Tian hadn't left at this time, he could see that his training plan only said to launch quirks long-distance running for 2 hours at full strength, and then followed by a long list of other various training. On the first day, the reason why Li Tian kept running was mainly to test Li Tian's speed increase and endurance. Even Aizawa Shota did not expect that Li Tian really ran for a whole day abruptly, and after returning there is hardly any exhaustion to be seen. From then on, Aizawa Shota understood that his student, who eats more than 100 times the amount of ordinary people, is not in vain. And according to the instrument Li Tian was wearing at that time, he made Li Tian's average speed every half hour. Then, Aizawa Shota discovered the surprising growth speed of Li Tian's quirks. Just the previous hour in running, Li Tian's speed increased by almost 10 meters per second compared to the beginning. Then, for the next 10 hours, there was no growth of a millimeter, and the speed was maintained at the highest speed for more than 10 hours. At that time, Aizawa Shota was a little confused, so regular. He vaguely understood that if Li Tian ran for an hour a day from the very beginning, then there would be an explanation for his rapid improvement in strength since he entered school. What the hell? This kind of growth rate of quirks. Let alone met, he had never even thought of it. Steady progress every day, but not a tiny bit of progress. If there is no upper limit. Behind, even Aizawa Shota didn't dare to continue thinking about it. Aizawa Shota thought of Best Jeanist's warning after the internship in the workplace, as well as the Savitar incident in The Revenge of the Soul, with an unconcealable complexity on his face. Li Tian. I hope you will not go astray in the future. On the other side, Li Tian, who left, obviously didn't think that Aizawa Shota would think that he might go astray. Joke. Is he Li Tian the kind of person who will go astray? Going astray, he always runs over the building, okay? Proud face.jpg. In a mountain forest a little away from the camp, Li Tian's figure suddenly appeared here. Phew, I finally escaped. Li Tian looked rejoicing. If I make up for the training of yesterday and the day before yesterday, this is the rhythm that will allow me to run for 2 days and 2 nights in a row. As for now, the basic long-distance running training that disappears 3 times a day, of course Li Tian himself knows that he will only increase his speed in the first hour of training, and no matter how much he runs in the next 2 hours, his speed will not increase. Li Tian himself doesn't have any opinions. It's not that if there is no increase in speed, there is no meaning of training. But, compared with basic training, Li Tian now has more important training. The application with Aizawa Shota is not a joke. He really noticed a certain application ability of the speed force and came out for training. Standing next to a big tree, Li Tian put his right hand on the tree, activated the super speed force. His right hand instantly turned into a phantom and kept shooting, and the tree was visibly shaking rapidly with the naked eye stand up. Wow! The leaves on top of the rapidly shaking big tree were quickly shaken off. Seeing this, Li Tian under the tree stopped his right hand and entered the speed force mode. He closed his eyes in the rain of falling leaves, and controlled the speed force around him to spread out to the surroundings. It seems. It's here. Li Tian whispered to himself, slowly extended his right hand, and gently pinched a leaf with 2 fingers. And here. Li Tian stretched out his left hand, and also gently pinched a leaf in front of him. This way. Here. This way. As Li Tian muttered to himself, his hands seemed to turn into thousands of arms in an instant, pinching all the dozens of leaves that fell in midair. Sure enough. Li Tian suddenly opened his eyes, looking at the 2 thick leaves in his hands. His face showed joy. After the speed force is released, I can feel all the power within the range of the speed force. Speed. This is when Li Tian returned to the main body in the timeline of the avatar. When he experienced the moment of life and death again, Jian felt the throbbing of the speed force. At that time, when the sniper rifle bullet reached 10 meters behind Li Tian's head, what made Li Tian instantly aware of the threat of death was not Li Tian's own keen intuition, but the speed force warning Li Tian. At that time Li Tian's disguised Savitar did not enter the speed mode, but in the speed mode, the speed force actually radiated around. And 10 meters was the maximum range of the speed force in Li Tian's unconscious. That bullet broke into Li Tian's speed force domain with terrifying speed, which was the real reason that made Li Tian's scalp tingle and feel the crisis of death. It's really just in time. Li Tian couldn't help being pleasantly surprised. Although Li Tian was full of self-confidence before, to be honest, Li Tian was still a little apprehensive about the possible endless assassinations. After all, he couldn't guarantee that he could really be vigilant 24 hours a day. But now, as long as he can master this move proficiently, and combined with the activation of his speed force mode, which is about to be tempered, the so-called sneak attack and assassination, for him, will no longer be threatened. For him now, this trick is not inferior to the self-molecular control he has been asking for. Training. Li Tian's eyes were astonishingly bright, and he entered the speed mode in an instant, and then quickly shook the leaves of the 10 big trees around him. Then he closed his eyes and exited the speed force mode, radiated the speed force, felt the hundreds of fallen leaves around him, and slowly moved his feet, forward, backward, twisting his waist. Li Tian's speed is not fast, even it can be said to be very slow, like taking a walk in the garden. But the strange thing is, from the beginning to the end, among the countless leaves that fell, none of the fallen leaves touched Li Tian's clothes. The leaves fall quickly. Li Tian also stopped. In the opened eyes, Li Tian himself felt unbelievable for the action just now. This Li Tian was incomparably astonished. The kind of thing just now, even if he opened his eyes and entered the super fast mode, he might not be able to do it with super fast speed, but he just sensed the speed of the surrounding leaves and did it naturally. A leaf among thousands of flowers does not stick to the body. Li Tian instantly thought of such a state. Immediately afterwards, another sentence appeared in his mind. Slow down. Sometimes it's another kind of speed. Li Tian murmured softly, a kind of enlightenment flashed in his eyes. Of course, this does not mean that Li Tian must be slowed down, but meaninglessly fast is not necessarily faster than slowing down to find the target. Student Li Tian, it's really great that you're fine, Yaoyorozu said in surprise as he looked at Li Tian who had returned. As the monitor of Class A, although she has no sense of presence, she still cares about the students in her class. Of course, the rest of class also more or less felt happy looking at Li Tian who came back. It made everyone worry. Li Tian said with a light smile. Hey, Li Tian, what happened this time? What happened to Savitar and the police report? When did you offend that villain with a soul? Pu Window asked curiously. As soon as Pu Tao's question came up, no matter whether it was Class A or Class B, they all looked at Li Tian curiously. The popularity of this incident is really hot, and it also involves everyone in the hero department of their first-year hero, so even if they are as tired as dogs every day, they can't help but browse the internet, willing to sleep. Things are a bit complicated, how should I tell you? Li Tian pondered, and simply opened his mouth to explain. That soul-possessed soul was a villain I met in my island incident last time. At that time, I severely injured him, but he also escaped. As a result, his quirks were abolished by my attack, yes, and then Savitar and I appeared on the internet this time. No, it should be about our first-year hero department. As for the reason, it's because the organization that created the large-scale incident with the possessed soul this time wanted to link Savitar with his Xiangying and All Might to make trouble, so the last sentence of that post appeared. Savita is someone from the first-year hero department of Xiangying High School. As for me, it's simply because of the spirit's revenge, and the first-year hero subject, except for my quirks, no one can match up with Savitar. Listening to Li Tian's explanation, more than 30 people present looked at each other. A little dizzy. Kirishima said blankly. Most of the people next to him nodded subconsciously. This matter sounds simple, but it is a bit complicated when you think about it carefully. At least, everyone in Class AB didn't understand much. They only understand that the reason is that Li Tian abolished a villain quirks in my island, and then the villain found an organization to cooperate with the hero who wanted the Savitar incident in order to get revenge. This incident happened, and Li Tian was for them. No, it should be their hero first-year class who nominally took the knife for Li Tian. Haha, the matter is over, it's useless to think so much. Everyone, let's hurry up and start cooking. Tonight, there will be a test of courage that everyone has been looking forward to. On the side, the big man of the Mandalay cat, he opened his mouth with a smile. They have a little understanding of the backstory this time, but after talking about it, they are not very friendly to the students who are still children. At the same time, the way she looked at Li Tian was also extremely strange. They naturally trusted the puppet cat's ability, but how they could not figure out how to get rid of Li Tian's suspicion. Test your courage. Li Tian was taken aback. Wasn't this supposed to be an event on the third day? How did it get pushed to the fifth day? But he forgot, because of this incident, the police had been here for the past 2 days. Under such circumstances, it was impossible to hold such a thing as a test of courage. That's right, the test of courage. I don't know if our classmate Li Tian's courage is as outstanding as his strength. The Mandalay cat smiled and looked at Li Tian. This. Li Tian's face turned weird. Thinking of the test of courage in the original book, thinking about the latest trick I just completed. This is a little embarrassing. When the students in Class B at the side heard the words of the Mandalay cat and Li Tian's strange expression, a certain idea suddenly came to their minds, and the eyes of each one conveyed the message. In the end, the entire Class B received a message. Test your guts, focus on Li Tian. Why are there so many people? Lying in the nutrition warehouse, Shi Gangmu looked at the thick stack of information in the doctor's hand with some astonishment. This. The doctor scratched his cheek and said, we announced in the underground guild that we would recruit a few elites to ambush the first-year hero department of Xiangying High School. The villain organization contacted us and said they are willing to send people over. These are the list. Dozens of villain organizations? Shiganmu was even more astonished. Didn't he just happen to get the forest training place of hero in the first grade of heroes? The remnants of All for One have grown in strength, But when did the underground organization in Neon gain such appeal? Could it be that my uncle's great reputation has spread throughout Neon without knowing it? Dead Handle Wood is a little ready to move. This. The doctor thought of the investigation results in the report below and explained a little speechlessly, which scud brat, he seemed to put a very difficult villain in the last My Island incident. Quirks was abolished, these villain organizations were coerced by someone to kill some scud kid. It's a scud kid again. Sikwomu's face suddenly darkened. In My Island, they had a good harvest, but they also lost Kurogiri, a good guy from Quirks. Although it is not worth mentioning compared to the harvest, it made Siganjiamu's hatred for Li Tian even more. But thinking of this situation in a blink of an eye, my heart turned cloudy, and I suddenly got better again. Doctor, how many villain can sneak into the vicinity of the male bud forest training camp without disturbing other professional hero? Dead Handwood asked in a deep voice. This. The doctor bowed his head and calculated, at most 30 people. 30 people. Sigongmu murmured, then, can I do it this time? Are you going? The doctor frowned. If your current body undergoes a fierce battle and causes backlash, then this month's effort will be wasted, and the transformation will have to start all over again. A fierce battle. Sigongmu also frowned. Although he is very confident about his current strength, but when he thinks about his powerful quirks that will eat back his body when he uses it with all his strength, and Li Tian's weird speed, he doesn't need to think about it. He knows that if he doesn't fully activate the quirks, it will be very difficult for Li Tian. Said, there is no threat at all. Forget it then. Shigaraki shook his head, we sent 5 Nomu here, and the remaining 25 people were gathered from the underground black market and sent to Shangying's forest training camp. Bar. Send Nomu. The doctor frowned, there are not many Nomu left, why don't the new ones go? Without a teacher, quirks, Nomu is just a consumable. If it is gone, it will be gone. Those newcomers have some potential. After some training, they will be a big force in the war 3 months later. Deadwood said indifferently. That's true. The doctor thought of something, his eyes flickered, and he nodded, if that's the case, let's send it out. I hope that the people recommended by the villain organization will not be too useless. Otherwise. Saganmu's face showed a cold look, and a killing intent flashed in his eyes, and he lay down again. Whether it's an elite or a waste, anyway, this time, very few can come back. The doctor turned on the machine and said casually while operating it. Although this operation is said to be an attack on Shangying, both Shigaraki and the doctor understand. Without Kurogiri's support, this attack is simply a suicide attack. Regardless of the final result, there will be no one left behind who went this time. The nutrition bin is closed, but the dead handle wood inside has no opening. It was just that he was going to say hello. Otherwise, he would not leave the staff in his organization to go to the underground guild to recruit people. The doctor closed the nutrition compartment, and after setting the doses of various medicines, he glanced indifferently at the dead tree in the nutrition compartment, with an indescribable meaning in his eyes, but he withdrew his gaze just for a moment. Go to another workbench. In front of the workbench full of various tools, the doctor looked at the little thing whose casing had been disassembled, and a flash of enthusiasm flashed in his eyes. If Li Tian was here at this time, he would definitely recognize this thing. This is the Quirks augmentation device that Kurogiri sent away at the end of My Island, and even the head of Kori is next to it. Holding a scalpel, the doctor frantically explored the mystery of the Quirks amplifier. As expected of Dr. David's painstaking invention, with this thing, the pressure on the body of the quirks of the dead handwood can definitely be relieved by more than 30%, so. On the other side, Li Tian, who was preparing for the test of courage, was completely unclear. After going through some twists and turns, things unexpectedly returned to the original history. League of Villains, once again took aim at their forest training. But the difference is that most of the villain who attacked this time were targeting him, not the entire hero family. What? Ah, one after another screams sounded in the forest. Try your guts and scare me. Li Tian was speechless as he walked on the path in the forest. Not to mention that he trained too much during the day, and as a result, he couldn't turn off the detection of the speed force that had been turned on until now, and he had already exposed the positions of the guys who were in charge of scaring him. The familiar ones are all the same as my own home, why am I still surprised? Different from the original, this time because there were too many people who failed at the end of the 2 classes, so the 2 class teachers, Aizawa Shota and Bradkin, did not force everyone to go to tutoring, but let the students who failed to act as ghosts to scare people. The qualified students entered the jungle one by one. Hey, Xiao Wei, pay attention, that Zhen Shuan is coming soon. Just wait a minute and startle him like a bang, Gu Baru said in a low voice. Yeah. The big and small Wei from Class B, who was dressed in white and had a pale face, nodded again and again, with a look of excitement on his face. Being in charge of scaring things, it's really interesting. It's completely exposed. About 20 meters away, Li Tian looked at the front of the speechless and muttered to himself. Because when he was training at that time, he was training with the goal of exercising his energy, and the training turned out to be surprisingly smooth. Even if he does not use the Speed Force mode now, the weak Speed Force in his body will naturally move the surrounding area by about 30 meters. All the velocities are fed back into his brain. Walking blankly, the ground 1 meter in front of Li Tian. Xiao Wei suddenly appeared, staring straight at Li Tian with a pale face. Li Tian nodded as a greeting, and then walked forward. X. Bone-pulling soft fabrication. What's the meaning? Do not care? And Li Tian obviously didn't care about the two people who were petrified after being swept by him. He just wanted to finish the journey quickly and end this boring game for him. Here it goes again. Li Tian casually glanced at the moving figures he sensed on both sides. 5 people. So many people gathered together. Li Tian murmured in his heart, but he didn't take it to heart. However, do it. There was a loud drink. Then 4 figures jumped out from both sides of Li Tian, staggered and surrounded Li Tian in the middle, holding each one in their hands. All of them were black iron guys. Da da da. Da da da. The continuous and rapid gunshots broke the silent forest, and the 4 flames were extremely conspicuous in this dark forest. Surrounded in the middle, Li Tian didn't panic, but the cold light flickered in his eyes. When the loud shout sounded, he realized that the voice wasn't any of his classmates, and the 4 figures that jumped out after that made him even more sure. And at that moment, Li Tian had actually activated the Speed Force and was about to strike directly, but the 4 people who appeared with that strike were not just those 4 people, the gravity in Li Tian's area. At that moment, no, it was even earlier, and it skyrocketed suddenly. Although he hadn't experienced any gravity chamber, Li Tian felt that the gravity had definitely increased by more than 7 or 8 times. Moreover, the soil under his feet softened in an instant, as if it had turned into a quagmire. In just an instant, Li Tian's 2 souls had already sunk. As early as the very beginning, this group of villain had already figured it out, and it might be discovered in advance, so. The change in gravity was before the loud shout, and after Li Tian was restrained by gravity first, it was tight, then the soil under his feet turned into a quagmire, completely restricting his speed, and finally the 4 who jumped out with a slight charge and used their guns to kill him. What an insidious trap. Li Tian's face sank, but he didn't panic. If it is said that before yesterday, this kind of lore trap might have caused Li Tian a lot of trouble, then today. For Li Tian, it is not a trouble at all. Although at the beginning, Li Tian didn't expect that there would be someone ambushing here, so he was a little careless and was pulled by the gravity, but at that moment, Li Tian quickly activated the Speed Force and entered the Speed Force mode. Although the interval was only a few tenths of a second, to Li Tian, it was far more than 10 or even 20 seconds. The quagmire and the 4 figures that jumped out appeared completely while Li Tian turned a blind eye. Very well. I've gotten used to it. Li Tian took a deep breath. Even if he activates the Speed Force, he still can't ignore the impact of the moment the gravity changes on his body. Difficulty breathing, body imbalance, creaking bones and muscles, and even a momentary stagnation of blood flow caused a brief fainting due to lack of oxygen to the brain. If he hadn't activated the Speed Force in time to speed up various body functions by hundreds of times, Li Tian would probably be crushed to the ground by this gravity at that moment because he lost consciousness. The tongues of flame lit up, illuminating the surrounding dark forest, allowing Li Tian to clearly see the 5 attacking figures. Seeing the unloaded bullets slowly flying towards him, a cold light flashed in Li Tian's eyes, and he took a quick step under his feet, and rushed out. The quagmire that ordinary people seem to be difficult to break free from is very difficult for people who can run on the water. For Li Tian, it's like pediatrics at all. Whoosh! With a flash of golden lightning, Li Tian directly rushed out of the gravity area, and then lightened his body, and instantly circled around the 4 hot men. The force lightning directly destroyed their fragile nerve network through the back of their necks. In the end, Li Tian appeared in front of the one who shouted, and at the same time it was also probably the ability user of the gravity quirks. He directly grabbed the opponent and knocked him to the ground, and then the lightning speed and lightning also disrupted the nervous system of the opponent's body. Tell me your plan, purpose, and number of people. Li Tian pulled the other party into the Speed Force, and asked in a deep voice. The momentary change obviously caught this person off guard, with a dazed look on his face, but, as a villain, he instinctively made him reply. Dream. Bang. Li Tian remembered the knife in his hand and directly knocked him out. No. Why didn't you play your cards according to the routine? This was the last thought of the bewildered villain. And Li Tian stood up at this time. He was also dizzy, subconsciously acted according to the previous method. Now does he still need to interrogate the number of villain? Li Tian stood up, directly kicked the stunned villain out of the Speed Force, and then instantly let go of his Speed Force at this time, extending infinitely towards the surroundings. In just a split second, all the troubles around Li Tian and within a kilometer range appeared in his mind. Although he couldn't tell which ones were villain and those were his classmates, Li Tian still started to run quickly, rushing towards the position of the person he detected. Not villain. Not villain. Not villain. In less than a second, the locations of the 3 students closest to Li Tian have been confirmed safe by Li Tian. And the 4th. Villain. Li Tian looked at the 3 completely unfamiliar figures walking in the dense forest and the weapons they were carrying. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he rushed over quickly, hitting the opponent 3 times in a row, knocking the opponent unconscious, and at the same time repairing a ray of lightning penetrated and destroyed the villain's neural network. Didn't stop at all. Li Tian continued to run towards the next place. While running in the Speed Force mode, every time Li Tian takes a step, a large amount of Speed Force will be born, and then spread out, and the speed change map in a further range will be reflected in Li Tian's mind. Compared with reality, it is only a short time in just 2 seconds. In Li Tian's mind, the range of perception has reached a radius of 5 kilometers. Who are you? Big Sister Tang Kazuka of Class B yelled. This forest is a private domain, no entry is allowed. Behind her, there are Tokiyami and Shoji. The 3 of them form a triangle with their backs facing each other, each wary of a direction. And in front of them were 3 people they didn't know. Private domain. I'm so scared. A villain grinned and teased, but little sister, we have already entered, what do you think should be done? Okay, cuz soldiers, stop playing, catch them all first. Another villain said in a deep voice. In the opponent's right hand, a purple light quickly changed into the appearance of a weapon, walked towards the 3 of Kento, Tokiyami and Shoji. It's villain. Tokiyami shouted in a deep voice, using quirks so recklessly to fight, except for the professional hero, that is villain. From Tokiyami's abdomen, the black shadow came out quickly. Maybe it's because at night, the black shadow's size at this time even surpassed the tall Shoji beside him. How could there be a villain here? The tentacles behind Shoji changed rapidly, one turned into a third eye, one turned into an ear, and the rest twisted behind him into 2 thick arms. So decisive. Kento Kazuyo felt a sudden surprise in his heart when he felt the movements of the 2 people behind him. Although she reacted quickly when she learned that the other party was villain, she became vigilant, but she could feel that the 2 people behind her didn't just activate quirks to be vigilant. Instead, he directly made preparations to start fighting at any time. This was something she hadn't considered subconsciously at all. Her first reaction at the time was to subconsciously look at the escape route and escape plan. As this Class A. After reacting, Kazuyo Kento quickly adjusted his mentality, and while he was alert to the villain preparing to fight, a flame called fighting spirit ignited in his heart. You can't lose to them and embarrass the teacher. If her homeroom teacher Bradkin knew what Kento was thinking at this time, he would be very pleased. Haha, look, these 3 children actually want to fight us. In the villain who is called Kos Bing looked at the movements of the 3 of Tokiyami, and suddenly grinned. Tears could even be seen in the corners of his eyes. Tokiyami, Shoji and Kento frowned at the villain who laughed unceremoniously. The villain didn't take them seriously at all. The other 2 villain didn't smile at all. On the contrary, they all looked at the 3 of Tokiyami vigilantly, and one of them warned in a deep voice, "Cuz soldier, strength never depends on age. But quirks, have you forgotten your common sense?" But this gesture did not make Tokiyami and the others happy. On the contrary, the more cautious the villain, the worse their situation would be. Common sense. That's the common sense of the week. There are only 3 students, and they are still in the 1st grade. Do they know how to use quirks? I think the more you live, the less courageous you are. Cuz Bing stared bloodthirsty looking at the 3 of them. He licked his lips and said sarcastically. You. Okay, even if they are students, they are also Shangying students. Villain holding Quirk's photochemical weapon in his hand said in a deep voice, "Don't be careless, let's attack with all your strength." As he spoke, he rushed forward first. Protect me, I'll attack. Tokiyami introduced himself. The light blade in this villain's hand was extremely sharp at first glance. Except for him, the other two were all solid physical quirks, and started fighting, absolutely suffer. Moreover, although the weapon in the opponent's hand is bright, it is very dim and will not affect him in the early game, and his strength can be fully utilized. The other two also had no objection. They directly blocked Tokiyami's sides and looked at villain vigilantly. Destroy. The black shadow in the dark night is undoubtedly greatly enhanced. The black shadow in front of Tokiyami suddenly swelled, and the pitch-black bird opened its teeth and claws and roared extremely ferociously, flying towards the villain who rushed over.
Boom. Soy Ying's claws directly smashed heavily on the opponent's photochemical weapon, and the villain was shaken all over. His face turned red, and a smear of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth.
What a terrifying power. The villain showed a look of horror on his face, and he quickly shouted, "Don't watch the show, let's do it with all our strength." But just with this heart, the black shadow's huge head suddenly extended, and its thin beak quickly pecked at the villain. Not good. The villain's complexion changed instantly, and with a thought, the purple brilliance on his head flickered, and a helmet instantly condensed into shape. Crack. A crisp sound sounded directly. Although the instantly condensed helmet of the villain was not broken, it still made him dizzy. And villain's quirks should have condensed that piece of purple light into various entities. After condensing the helmet, the weapon in his hand inevitably shrank and dimmed a bit. At this time, the black shadow did not miss this opportunity. The claws holding the villain weapon suddenly pushed hard, and with both hands of the opponent's weapon, they directly smashed heavily on the opponent's chest, knocking him out. Life or death is unknown. Destroy. Destroy. Good. So strong. Kazuka Kento was stunned. Although it wasn't an instant kill, he managed to kill villain within 3 moves, which is too powerful. At this time, Shoji also showed surprise in his eyes. He never expected that the power that Tokiyami erupted at this time would be so terrifying and powerful. What was even more astonishing was the two villain. None of them thought that their companions would be eliminated after a single face-to-face encounter. Damn it. That brat's strength is too terrifying, invincible. Cuz Soldier, who had looked down on Tokiyami 3 people with an arrogant face just now, was in a hurry, shouted, and at the same time quickly activated the quirks. "I'll hold this monster, you attack his body." The whole body was instantly covered with scales. It looked like a lizard, and the bright gray scales glowed under the moonlight, as if showing the opponent's terrifying defense. The other villain was also clear. Without the slightest delay, with a swipe of his right hand behind his back, a thick stack of cards was taken out, thrown out, and the cards spun rapidly in midair to draw a road. The strange arc cut towards the 3 of them rapidly. The constantly rotating card looks extremely sharp. Villain, Origami Nanhi, quirks Origami, can freely control the paper he folds, and the ones he throws out are all paper cards that are as sharp as steel blades after he folds them in half with quirks 7 times. "Leave it to me." Quan Tang snorted, and took a step forward. His hands suddenly became tens or hundreds of times bigger, like 2 huge cattail fans, flapping quickly. Waves of hurricanes blew out from the palm of Quan Tang. Even if the flying paper cards were manipulated by the villain, they lost their balance in an instant and flew slantingly to one side. It's not that simple. The villain turned cold, threw a bunch of cards from behind again, and then manipulated them to attack the 3 of them from all directions. Oops. Fist's face changed. If it was only her, it would be considered an attack from all directions, and she could blow it away, but there are still 2 companions here. Just pass out. Shoji suddenly gave a low voice. Behind the villain who was concentrating on manipulating paper cards, at some point Shoji stretched out his tentacles, and instantly twisted them into thick arms, hitting the back of the villain's head with a punch, directly stunned him. The moment the villain fainted, the cards seemed to have lost their movement, but they flew forward for a while due to inertia, and finally collided with each other in the air because no one was manipulating them, and they flew down. It's solved. Quan Tang breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, Shoji also quickly looked at Tokiyami's battlefield. Destroy. I want to destroy. Unknowingly turned into a black shadow more than 3 meters high, it roared to the sky, holding a leg of the Cuz Soldier in its huge hand, and the villain, obviously already passed out. This. Looking at the scene in front of him, both Shoji and Kento were stunned. Good guy, they played so arrogantly, they thought they had encountered some kind of scum. In the end, it was an idiot. Is this really villain? And dare to underestimate our hero's villain? Kento couldn't help but speak. It's not that the villain are weak, but that Tokiyami is too strong. Shoji said, looking at Tokiyami worriedly. But he remembered what Tokiyami said, the darker the environment, the stronger the strength of the shadow, and the more difficult it is to control. Drink. Sombra is back. The villain had already been defeated, Tokiyami immediately yelled, trying desperately to take back Sombra. Over there, Soi Ying, who was having a great time playing, suddenly received Tokiyami's order, and subconsciously resisted. His originally fierce face suddenly became extremely ferocious, and the reminder of more than 3 meters high instantly swelled up. He doesn't want to go back, he still wants to spend more than 10 years in the sun. Sombra. Run away. Crack. A streak of golden thunder suddenly appeared beside the black shadow, and the glaring light enveloped the black shadow layer by layer. What? The black shadow screamed in an instant, and quickly shrank back from the only exit wrapped in golden light. Sombra. Go home, I want to go home. The black shadow who was shouting just now retracted directly into Tokiyami's abdomen. And Tokiyami was also tired and fell to the ground, sweating profusely. Controlling Sombra's continuous testing from the edge of rampage is very exhausting. Thank you, Li Tian. Panting, Tokiyami looked at Li Tian at the side and thanked him. The streaks of golden thunder just now belonged to Li Tian, who arrived at the scene at some unknown time. It's okay, Tokiyami, if you don't have full control over your black shadow or if there is a light source around you, it's best not to let it go berserk, or let alone others. Your body and spirit can hardly bear the berserk shadow. Li Tian opened his mouth to remind. Tokiyami also nodded, of course he knew. He just didn't expect that there would be such a big difference between controlling the shadow in the dark and controlling the shadow in the dark to fight. He could clearly control the shadow in the cave. Okay everyone. This villain attack was organized and premeditated. Return to the camp as soon as possible and meet with the teachers, and try not to fight villain as much as possible. Dodging is the main thing. This time the villain who came here are not just at the level just now. Li Tian reminded seriously. Kendo and Shoji also nodded. The appearance of Tokiyami just now scared them a lot. Let alone fighting, they just want to take Tokiyami back to the camp. After Li Tian gave a warning, he left directly, but Speed Force told him clearly that there are still many villain here. Damn it. How many villain have come this time? In the midst of the Speed Force, leaving is also a bit itchy. Tokiyami and the others are the third group that Li Tian met and were forced to fight against villain. Obviously, although the villa who attacked Li Tian were very strong, they were not the first group of villa to attack Li Tian. Before, there was even a group of villain with guns on their bodies, but the guns did not start to be used because of the sound. The sound of the guns attacked by Li Tian was not just a display, but also a notification to the villain our target has been found, and it means that we can make a full shot. Afterwards, Li Tian heard gunshots and quickly found the group of villain, and knocked down the villain before the opponent's firepower completely broke out. Fortunately, the group of villain met it was Kirishima and Taijie. With just a few bullets, it still couldn't do much damage to the two hard guys. The woods have been cleared. In the forest, Li Tian could not help but heave a sigh of relief as he felt the pictures transmitted by the Speed Force in his mind. Every place in the forest where there were people, Li Tian ran once. The villain was directly stunned and destroyed the neural network, and the classmates told them to return as soon as possible, counting the 3 villain who were knocked down by Tokiyami and the others, the 5 villain he knocked down at the beginning, the 2 villain knocked down by Hong and Lagu, and the 5 villain who didn't touch the students during the patrol. A total of 15 people. Li Tian turned his head and looked towards the camp. His eyes were extremely cold. He could feel that there were a lot of people in the camp, minus the number of teachers and classmates. There were 15 more people. That is to say, 15 people were killed. The remaining villains still have 15 people. There are a total of 30 villain, and none of them are third-rate punks, but each of them is a villain with lethal power. There are even 7 or 8 known small guns, unknown firearms, don't know how many. This configuration, what a big work. A cold light flashed in Li Tian's eyes, and his figure suddenly drew a golden arc, rushing directly towards the camp. Everyone, don't worry. Go in one by one. The Mandalay cat shouted loudly at the starting point of the test of courage. Behind him, only Yaoyorozu Momo, Iida, Mineta, and Class B's Shiozaki Izuku, Awase Yoyuki, and Kakutori Pony left behind him. Well, the Mandalay cat, the girls seem to be very scared. Why don't you go in as a team? Don't be scared. Feng Tian's face was full of righteousness, but his eyes kept staring at Yaoyorozu Wanhee. The 2 girls in Class B were swept over. No need. No need for a Mandalay cat to answer. Yaoyorozu Momo refused without the slightest hesitation, and Shiozaki Izuku from Class B also looked at Putao with fierce eyes. Mineta-san, please don't insult all the female students. They are also pursuing to become professional hero. How can a test of courage be frightened? Iida stepped forward and said with a serious face. If Mineta-san agrees, I can also form a team with you. Shiozaki Azusa looked at Grape sharply, and the long hair of green vine in the shawl behind him stood up and twisted. Or no need. Putao smiled coquettishly. This girl looked like Jiro at first glance. She was extremely difficult to mess with. Child, you want to fart? The horned girl next to her also said directly to Putao with a weird accent. Putao shut herself in place for a moment. Huh? What's wrong with him? The horned girl looked at Awase Yoyuki beside him with a confused expression and asked. No. It's nothing, he should be thinking about life. Haha. Awase Yoyuki couldn't help but twitched his shoulders while holding back a smile. Shiozaki Izuku frowned, and a long vine hair behind him directly hung Awase Yoyuki up, before he opened his mouth to warn, don't make fun of the neon words in that corner. No. It's not me. It's Monoma who taught Kakudori to reject that peak song before he left. I just told Kodotori the time to say that. Awase Yoyuki a decisive confession. That bastard. Shiozaki Izuku snorted coldly, but still let Awase Yoyuki down. The horned cannon girl was still confused. That woman is more violent than Jiro. The grapes at the corner were trembling. Haha, the students are really full of energy, the puppet cat said with a smile on his face. It seems that the training intensity during the day can be increased. Hu looked at the active crowd and said in a deep voice. Are you a devil? Haha. Look at their expressions, it's so funny. The puppet cat looked at the dull crowd and laughed wildly. Sure enough, your courage still needs to be exercised. Just a little more training can scare you. This kind of courage is too far behind for professional hero. The North American shorthair cat took a step forward and said loudly. When you can keep your face in the face of doubling the training, you can. Double the training. The North American shorthair cat said seriously. W. Everyone present looked at the North American shorthair cat expressionlessly. This joke is not cold at all, really, it is too hot. Courage? Iida was taken aback. His glasses instantly reflected the light of enlightenment under the moonlight. I see. The so-called test of courage is to exercise the courage of the students, who want to become a professional hero. You must have the courage to face the collapse of Mount Tai and not change your face under any circumstances. Sure enough, Shangying will not prepare completely useless training for us, everyone. Let us all practice courage happily. Iida shouted excitedly. I feel. He thinks too much. Shiozaki Izuku looked at the inexplicably excited Iida with black lines. This kid. It's a pity not to go into politics. The corner of the Mandalay cat's mouth twitched, and he thought to himself. Okay. 1 minute is up. Who will be next? Ready to go? Mandalay cat shouted. It's me. Awase Yoyuki hurried forward and was about to walk into the woods. However, come back quickly. The Mandalay cat's expression suddenly changed, and its right hand suddenly grabbed Awase Yoyuki's arm and jumped back, dodging directly. The next moment, something fell from the sky and hit the place where the two of them were just now, exploding with a bang, sending dust flying. If the Mandalay cat hadn't pulled Awase Yoyuki back just now, I'm afraid that even if they didn't die at this time, the two of them would definitely be seriously injured. It's really bad luck. It's actually smashed crooked. In the smoke, a regretful voice sounded. Who are you? The Mandalay cat looked at the other party vigilantly and asked loudly. On the side, the North American shorthair, Ragdoll and Tiger quickly stepped forward and stood side by side with the Mandalay. Awase Yang Xue at the side was startled by the sudden attack in front of her at this time, and hurriedly retreated between several other students before becoming vigilant. However, there was no waiting for the person in the smoke to answer. Bang. 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 Another 4 waves descended from the sky, surrounding the 4 people and students of Pussycat. Isn't that kid here? It's really bad luck. The voice of the speaker was hoarse and ugly like a drake. It's not good or bad luck. As long as you catch this group of students and professional hero, that kid will definitely fall into the trap of himself. I'm just afraid that that kid will be killed by the people in the forest. Drake snorted coldly and said hoarsely. Killing that kid. It's not that simple. We have studied that kid. The speed of the opponent's quirks is too fast. If you want to kill that guy, you can only crush the opponent with speed or take advantage of it. Sneak attack the king's opponent. And what kind of test of courage is being held in the woods? You say how vigilant people will be with this kind of nervousness. If you want to get the other party's life in advance, then. Huh. The villain snorted twice. No need for others to say more, I immediately thought of a lot. But at this time, watching a group of villain brazenly discuss murder in front of them, and it is very likely that they want to kill a certain student, this makes Pussycat, a professional hero group, feel sincerely got angry. At this time, the smoke and dust raised from the sky gradually dispersed. A tall figure came into everyone's eyes, Nomu. All three of Class A were stunned. The appearances of those figures that descended from the sky are almost exactly the same as the Nomu in the last USJ incident. They all look like birds, and their brains are flipped outside. It wasn't Nomu who was speaking just now, though. On the back of Nomu, one after another figure came down. Behind each Nomu, there are 2 villain on their backs. 5 Nomu, that is to say, there are 10 people, and counting Nomu, it is 10-5 villain. I don't know. The ragdoll cat's eyes quickly scanned the group of villain, and then shared all the information through the Mandalay cat's telepathy. This group of people, none of them appeared on the police statistics list, that is to say, they are all hidden villain who appeared for the first time or did not have a wanted warrant on their appearance. As for the 5 monsters who are the same, the character is officially named after Nomu. It is an artificial human modified in violation of regulations. It usually has multiple quirks and has strong physical strength. It belongs to the villain organization, League of Villains. Plural quirks androids, adding so many villain. It's tricky. Including Ragdoll itself, hearing the analyzed information felt extremely troublesome in their hearts. Sudden. Da. A burst of intense gunshots came from the dense forest. Submachine gun. The faces of the Mandalay cat and everyone changed instantly. Not good, students. Hey, you guys still want to divide your troops at this time, right? You're not looking for death like that. Villain looked at the 4 of Pussycat sarcastically. The faces of the 4 changed slightly. Just now, they really thought so. The gunfire has stopped. The Mandalay cat looked ugly. She didn't know who won the one-touch shootout, but they could only pray silently now. After all, if they don't unite, the 4 of them and the 6 students beside them will not be able to wait for the arrival of support.
And Yaoyorozu Momo, Iida, Mineta, Shiozaki Izusa, Awase Yoyuki, and Kakatori Pony, among the 4 of them, were also watching the villain back-to-back vigilantly. Students, in the name of the professional hero Pussycat group, you are allowed to use quirks to participate in this battle, but everything is about saving your life, and you must not be greedy for merit and be lured by villain to take the initiative to attack. Do you understand? The Mandalay cat snapped.
Yes. Without hesitation, Yaoyorozu won, Iida, and even Mineta agreed without hesitation, directly entering the fighting stance. On the other side, Izuku Shiozaki, Yoyuki Awase, and Pony Kakutori from Class B were stunned. He looked at the 3 students with expressionless and serious faces in a daze. Even Mineta, who looks the most obscene on weekdays, now has a serious face, staring at villain closely. It can be seen that they are also very nervous, but their eyes are not the slightest tremor offset. As this Class A, even if he was as proud as Shiozaki, he had to admit at this time that there really was some kind of invisible, no, already visible gap between them and Class A. I can't embarrass Class B either. No matter how much Shiozaki Izuku thought about it, it was actually just a snap of the fingers, a blink of an eye. Yes. Shiozaki replied sharply. Awase Yoyuki and the horned gun girl on the side also reacted, and hurriedly responded. Very good. As expected of Xiangying's student, I can see that each of you is not someone who will hold back. The Mandalay cat's telepathic quirks, the voice rang directly in everyone's minds. Students, after the battle starts, Ragdoll will pass the quirks she saw to all of you through my command platform. You must remember that delaying time and saving your life are the most important thing. If you have a chance, leave the battlefield as soon as possible. Flee in the direction of the camp. No one opened their mouths to answer the Mandalay cat, using telepathy to tell them this, obviously for the purpose of keeping it secret, but everyone's eyes responded to her. I really can't do anything about you. I regret giving you the right to fight. Although the Mandalay cat said this, there was no sign of regret in his voice. Everyone. Be careful. General. Haha, how about Eraserhead? I must have won. Bradkin said with a smile on his face. And Aizawa Shota also showed extreme impatience on his usual sluggish face. Looking at the chessboard in front of him, there were a few more scarlet bloodshot eyes in his eyes. Sudden. Eraserhead, Bradkin, The students were attacked by villain in the forest. The initial estimate is that the number of villain is around 20 to 30. Among them, there are 5 Nomu. Come to support them as soon as possible. Come support. Telepathic voices rang in the minds of Aizawa Shota and Bradkin. Whoosh. Before the Mandalay cat was finished in their minds, the two of them rushed out without saying a word, broke the window of the opposite room and jumped out, and then quickly rushed towards the forest where the test of courage was held. It seems that they still want to resist. A villain laughed and looked at Pussycat and 6 classmates who were surrounded in the middle and sneered. It's better to be obedient and catch them without a fight. We treat you old women perverted. I'm not interested in being a student, just listen to our arrangement obediently. It's not that I can keep you as one. Old woman. Pervert. The 4 members of Pussycat suddenly became furious. Is that an old woman? The North American short-hair cat's eyes flickered with a murderous look. Earth Monster Group. With a loud shout, all of a sudden ferocious earth monsters came out of the ground densely, making 2 circles inside and outside. One circle surrounded the group of villain who surrounded them, and the other circle it was inside, protecting the few of them firmly in the middle. Oh my god. The few students were dumbfounded looking at the scene in front of them. Iida Yaoyorozu Wan and the others knew from Green Valley that North American short-hair cats can create dozens of monsters, but all they saw were ferocious monsters at a glance. The scene still stunned them, not to mention the few people in Class B. As expected of a veteran professional hero, the surrounded villain looked at the astonishing number of earth monsters around them solemnly, but they didn't panic. Roar. What? On the periphery, ferocious earth monsters charged towards the villain crazily, and large trees were directly pushed down by the earth monsters. Even a few loyal ape-like earth monsters ran directly from the big trees and rushed over. It was like a beast siege in a fantasy. The scene was extremely wild. As for the surrounded villain, it is obvious that there is no such thing as a soft-legged shrimp. 2 or 3 villains stood up and transformed instantly. A stone titan with a height of more than 3 meters, a muscular man with a red body, and the other was scaled up to a 5-meter-high titan, directly blocking the other villain. The force will collapse the large body of the earth monster. This kind of quirks, which is similar to the enhanced system, is a very common type regardless of the villain's surface. Not to mention, those 5 Nomu are not just a means of transportation. The first time the Earth Monster Group appeared, the 5 Nomu rushed directly towards the Earth Monster Group. One by one Earth Monster's warcraft was directly broken into clods. Other villain also used quirks, casually aiming at a few fish that escaped the net to break them up. At this time, even a few students could see that the group of ferocious-looking earth monsters were actually just bluffing, and the situation on the field could almost be said to be one-sided. But the group of earth monsters is constantly winning. Under the control of the North American short-hair cat, every time a earth monster collapses, a new earth monster will emerge and join the battlefield to charge. Villain and Nomu of the amplification department are all held back. And the villain who rushed over after passing the pass was also overwhelmed by the continuous appearance of earth monsters in the inner circle. The 6 students couldn't help but stare dumbfounded at the huge scene that can only be seen on TV. This kind of scene. Putao looked at the 2 purple grape balls in his hand, then looked at the huge scene in front of him, swallowed involuntarily. This is too exaggerated. One person can withstand a dozen powerful villain. Is this the strength of a senior professional hero? Several other people also looked sideways, with an unconcealable shock on their faces. It's not a one-man effort, the tiger on the side suddenly said. Several people looked over subconsciously. I saw Hu's serious face at this time. The muscles all over his body were already swollen, and at the same time the sharp cat claws in his hand had already stretched out, looking at the distant battlefield vigilantly. But there were several words in his mouth. The student explained. The scene in front of you is not formed by the North American short-hair cat alone. The ragdoll's search quirks locks onto the villain, and the Mandalay cat's telepathy communicates indiscriminately. With the addition of the soil flow quirks of North American short-haired cats, such combat power was finally formed. The tiger said in a deep voice. Is the cooperation of the 3 of you? Everyone was stunned, looking at the 3 women who were waiting in full force at this time, and they didn't even pay any attention to them, and some kind of understanding suddenly appeared in their eyes. Just like the ancients used saltpeter, sulfur and charcoal to make gunpowder. In this era of quirks, if you can find a partner who can match quirks, then the strength is definitely not as simple as 1 + 1 + 1, but 10 times or even several times. 10 times the explosive growth. Who said in a deep voice. The villain in the Earth Demonic Beast group are far less stressed than the students and the few people in Pussycat, after all. Aren't you alright? A villain who kept spitting out extremely concentrated and terrifying gas bullets in his palm asked in a deep voice to a villain behind him who was protected by him. "He hasn't come yet." The villain replied casually with his usual complexion, and at the same time he walked a few steps to the side in a leisurely manner, as if he was in a battlefield full of ferocious monsters. "Take a walk in the courtyard." 3 earth monsters pounced on his position, and then were hit by an air bomb in a series of 3. 3 out of them reached the ground and turned into ordinary soil. Although it was a battlefield where the battle was extremely fierce, but this person seemed to be walking in his own garden, taking no time to rush. From the very beginning of the battle, this figure had never touched any earth monsters. Every time it was either blocked by the villain next to it, or someone rescued it in time. It was extremely weird. "Here we come." Villain's eyes suddenly lit up, and a thought instantly passed through his consciousness. Among the group of earth monsters, 2 villain were stunned at the same time, and then the expressions on their faces suddenly became pleasantly surprised, but then quickly restrained, extremely dignified. A few of the other villain also seemed to have received some orders, and then they approached them vaguely and guarded them. But at this time, in the jungle in the distance, a lightning-like figure galloped towards, and instantly rushed into the extremely tragic battlefield in front of him, speeding rapidly in the battlefield. No one could react. Almost in the blink of an eye, the 5 crazy Nomu were pierced through their mouths by steel rods as thick as a baby's arm and stuck upside down on the ground. All this happened so fast that even the 5 Nomu barely reacted. Their bodies were still punching wildly, as if they were attacking those earth monsters. "There is no Nomu with super regenerating quirks," Li Huo whispered to himself, but he didn't care. The moment he rushed into the battlefield, he noticed these Nomu. The strange but lethal quirks were killing all directions among the earth monsters, and it was hard for people not to notice. And the combination of Nomu's difficult super regeneration quirks and shock-absorbing quirks last time made Li Tian's memory particularly deep. Of course, he would first attack these 5 Nomu as the target. Today is different from the past. The current Li Tian is no longer the kid who was able to break through twice the speed of sound at that time. With the speed of Mach 6, even if he does not need to hold the sharp steel rods tightly, he just throws them at close range, with an invincible force of terror. Even if it was Nomu who was able to wrestle with all might at that time, Li Tian would not be afraid. "Now, let's get rid of these guys." Li Tian's eyes flashed with speed and force, and he looked at the villain in the group of earth monsters. However, "Get up." With a soft drink, a golden light curtain instantly enveloped the entire area. In an instant, even Li Tian in the Speed Force mode couldn't react to the absolute instant. The light curtain rose up, completely covering the surroundings. "Do it." There was a shout, and the light curtain covering a large area shrank rapidly. In just 1 second, it shrank into a light sphere with a diameter of 1 meter. And in the center of the light sphere is Li Tian. Successful capture. Among the remaining villain, 1 villain was pale and frighteningly weak, but looking at Li Tian in the ball of light, a smile appeared on his face, and he drank lightly. Successful capture. Among the remaining villain, there was a young villain whose face was pale and frighteningly weak, but when he saw Li Tian in the ball of light, a smile appeared on his face, and he let out a soft drink. And at the center of the ball of light, Li Tian, who was covered, also had a look of astonishment. "Just now that was." "Time pause," Li Tian said in a deep voice with an unbelievable look on his face. Although Li Tian does not yet have the ability to travel through time with the help of the Speed Force, but being able to use the Speed Force to create a time-remaining clone, Li Tian can be said to have taken half a step on the road to time travel. Only, now, he is still missing something, and he has not been able to step in with his heels as he wished. Therefore, Li Tian has a very delicate feeling about the illusory time. And just now, the position he was in was suspended by time for a full second, which is why he didn't have time to counterattack and dodge. "Good eyes." The pale, frail-looking young villain chuckled and said, "It's quirks down here." Time pause. Around him, 3 villains stepped forward to protect him without saying a word, firmly blocking those earth monsters from outside. "Looking at you, the cost of using quirks is obviously not small." Li Tian looked at his pale and weak face, and said in a deep voice, "It's barely bearable." The young villain chuckled lightly. "Light lag time stop. Quirks, time pause, suspend the time of a 3 meter x 3 meter x 3 meter range for 1 second, because each use requires a lot of energy, can be used at most once. But even if it is a time pause, you can't capture my speed and accurately pause on me. I think there should be predictions among you. No, there should be a villain who can predict quirks. There was no trace of fear on Li Tian's face. He looked at Guangzi in front of him and said calmly. That's right. My ability exists specifically to restrain people like you. The villain who seemed to be walking on the battlefield before also chuckled. Precognitive quirks and time-paused quirks. There should be a link between the two, which can seamlessly play and capture me. Is it similar to the quirks of the Mandalay cat's telepathy? Add this seemingly the mask that can suppress quirks. That guy with the soul really thinks highly of me. Actually set up this kind of trap, Li Tian muttered to himself. When he was still in the woods, Li Tian probably guessed the origin of this group of people. After all, someone would gather 30 villain to attack Xiangying for no reason, and it's not like everyone is as brainless as the previous Sigongmong. Therefore, the target of this group of people is most likely to be him, the pursuit and killing of him that the soul possessed. Especially at the very beginning, it can be said that it was an ambush completely aimed at him, which is enough to illustrate this point. And the current scene is even more certain of this. Incomparably rare, it can be said that this is the first time Li Tian has heard of time-paused quirks, and equally rare, currently Li Tian only knows about the precognitive quirks of Night Eye, and also rare, similar to his class teacher Aizawa Shoda quirks that can suppress quirks. The combination of these three extremely rare quirks is undoubtedly aimed at his super speed force. And it is impossible for a certain villain organization to collect so many rare quirks, so this must be a member from several different villain groups. Isn't it a threat, but also a lure? Li Tian figured it out. On that day, when the possessed soul went crazy and threatened him, there was still a routine. He only said that he threatened those villain organizations to attack Li Tian, but he missed the countless secrets he could use to master to lure other villain to attack Li Tian. And this kind of joint ambush attack by the rare quirks is obviously the possibility of lure, far more likely than threat. Even Li Tian suspected that this ambush was planned in advance by the soul-possessed soul, which was specially selected by the soul-possessed soul from the quirks information of the villain he had mastered according to Li Tian's super speed force quirks. The villain who set up a killing game against Li Tian. I should have thought of this when I saw the way the government attaches great importance to spirits possessing souls. Li Tian's eyes flashed a haze, and he thought to himself. It can only be said. At that time, the skill of pretending to be crazy and foolish was too high, so that Li Tian and even the police, All Might and the teachers beside him instinctively ignored this point. Temporarily throwing away the guesses in his mind, Li Tian looked at the technical mask and murmured, quirks that determine the degree of suppression of quirks according to the density of the mask. It seems not as convenient as Mr. Aizawa's quirks. At the very beginning, when the light mask enveloped the audience, he could clearly see that the other people's quirks were not suppressed. Only when the time paused and the light mask covered only 3 meters x 3 meters, only Li Tian could feel the powerful suppression of quirks by the mask. It seemed like a long period of time, but in fact the whole process definitely did not exceed 2 seconds. Pussycat in the distance didn't even have time to react, and saw Li Tian being fastened in a ball of light. Student Li Tian. The expression of the puppet cat in the distance changed instantly. Then through the telepathy of the Mandalay cat, he quickly informed the others. Student Li Tian. After receiving the voice transmission from the Mandalay cat, ah no, telepathy, all the students present were shocked. Even the 3 of Class B were looking at the conspicuous golden man on the battlefield in disbelief. Round ball. However, the tall and dense earth monsters blocked their sight at this time, and they couldn't see clearly at all. But the only puppet cat who can see clearly, at this time, suddenly grew its mouth, with a look of astonishment on its face. Villain saw Li Tian's face in the light mask and analyzed their abilities indifferently, and suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. Don't think about playing any tricks. The power of this mask is all on you alone. You can't use quirks now. Moreover, this mask is harder than steel. Someone in the villain immediately shouted. Tricks. Li Tian laughed softly, and glanced at the 10 villain in front of him. Among the 10 villa, it can be seen that 3 of them are protected by 2 villain, respectively. There is another person who walks freely among the earth monsters and dodges the attacks of the earth monsters one by one. Red. With a flash in Li Tian's eyes, he suddenly understood that the one walking among the earth monsters should undoubtedly be the other party's predictive quirks, and the 3 people who were protected, except for the light lag and time stop, the other 2 it should be the user of the mask quirks, and the villain who may have telepathy similar to the Mandalay cat. Do you seem to be very afraid of me? Li Tian glanced around and chuckled. 10 villain. At this time even the few people guarding the villa against the impact of the earth demon beasts looked at Li Tian very vigilantly. As the villain invited by the soul, They are very similar to the thing that the soul said that Li Tian is Savita. Because there is no need to lie to them with the soul. As for the police report and the alibi that appeared in the city. Just kidding. That stuff, in this age of quirks, is a joke. Damn it. The retreat promised by the League of Villains. Why hasn't it come yet? Several villains cursed in their hearts at this moment. Looking at Li Tian with a calm face, the bad premonition in their hearts became more and more clear. But they couldn't think of how Li Tian could come back at this time, and it was precisely in this way that they could suppress the bad premonition in their hearts. Delaying time. Li Tian could tell what the villain meant at a glance. As for the reason, of course it's because he's stalling for time too. Li Tian felt the rebirth of the induction in his body, that contacted the weak speed force, and a look flashed in his eyes. The time has come. With a thought in Li Tian's mind, a faint lightning arc of speed force danced in his eyes. Whoosh. Li Tian started to run straight away, galloping at lightning speed, and rushed towards the golden ball of light at top speed. Although it only takes 3 seconds to accelerate, it is enough for Li Tian. Mach 6, no. The terrifying speed far exceeding Mach 6 burst out in an instant. Boom. With a loud noise, the ball of light that was comparable to steel was directly blasted out of a big hole by Li Tian's punch, and Li Tian's whole body had already appeared outside the ball of light at this time. Bang. 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 A series of muffled sounds sounded. 1. 2. 3. In the blink of an eye, 10 villains all lay down and paralyzed on the ground. The speed seems to be faster again. It's really distressing. After finishing work, Li Tian quit the super speed force mode, pretending to sigh to himself. It's a pity. At this time, the 10 villains have all passed out, and none of the villains saw Li Tian's stiff and old-fashioned pretending to be. In the distance, the ragdoll cat was shocked. Her quirks let her see from the beginning to the end. Li Tian made a brilliant debut. As soon as she appeared, the 5 Nomu were dealt with, and then the trap broke out. Li Tian was caught, and then Li Tian inexplicably broke the game and took down all the villains. From the beginning to the end, in only 4 or 5 seconds, there was a turning point, a turning point, a turning point. New League of Villains HQ. The smile on Shigangemu's face disappeared in an instant, and the stone armrest of the seat in his hand was directly smashed into slag, and a smoldering aura flashed across his face. Damn it. New League of Villains HQ. This. Shigong Muhong looked at the scene shown from the camera on Nomu's body with a look of astonishment. That kid, he was caught so easily. Shigong Muhong couldn't believe it. But what appeared in the picture in front of them was indeed the scene where Li Tian was covered by a golden light ball. Although he didn't know what the light ball was used for, since it was used, it should be similar to capture quirks. That quirks seems to have the ability to suppress quirks. The doctor on the side pushed his eyes and said, other people's quirks are similar, although they are not very powerful quirks, but they are absolutely rare in the world. The doctor looked at the other protected people in the picture and said in a deep voice. Rare in the world? Shigong Muhong looked at the influence, frowning slightly. In fact, everything happened too fast just now, and he didn't understand it too well. It was just inexplicable that that bastard had already been caught. The precognitive quirks capture the kid's movement position. The time-paused quirks are used to imprison the kid's actions. The abilities that can suppress the quirks are used to capture the kid, and there is also a mind-link quirks that makes the tacit understanding between several people perfect. One by one, the doctor explained the quirks of the group of villain to. As a doctor who has been with All for One for decades and has seen countless quirks, just looking at the effect on the screen, he probably already guessed the general effect of the other party's quirks. Although the strength of this group is not strong, but quirks are rare, and they cooperate very well, and they can still restrain the combination of that kid. It seems that this group of people are not all scattered generals. There should be a coordinating team behind everything. People. The doctor said unhurriedly, but the eyes under the glasses stared at the villain and began to flicker. Then now, shall we bring them back, along with that kid by the way? Shigong Muhong said in a deep voice, looking at the killing intent in Li Tian's eyes on the screen without hiding it. No hurry. The doctor shook his head. Things don't end that easily. The person behind this group is pretty good, but it's a pity that they know too little about the singularity of quirks, the quirks that have surpassed the limits of human beings. In other words, he simply doesn't know who the guy he is going to deal with is. Quirks singularity. What does it have to do with this? Shigong Mu Diao frowned slightly, although he had heard the word countless times from the doctor, and heard the doctor explain the quirks singularity countless times. However, Apart from his terrifying power that is said to be close to the limit of human beings, and the so-called breaking through the limit, he will run away and die, there is no other understanding. The relationship is getting bigger. The doctor looked at Li Tian, who was covered by the light ball in the picture, with uncontrollable excitement in his seemingly calm eyes. Although I didn't deal with that guy, but that guy's quirks, now like you, he has definitely reached the edge of what can be called the limit of human beings, and he has even stepped out. According to my years of research, the person who breaks through that limit will be called a god, the doctor said with a frenzied expression. Enough to be called a god. Sigong Muhong frowned, and couldn't help but think of the scene where the doctor said that he would become a god of destruction in the future. That's right. The frenzy in the doctor's eyes didn't subside in the slightest, but his face calmed down. People's quirks can't affect gods, so before becoming a god of destruction, Shigaraki, come and see first the power of God, and the power of one of your future enemies. Follow the doctor's words. The scene on the screen suddenly changed. Li Tian, who was originally locked in the golden light ball, appeared outside in an instant, while the 10 villain who were sure to win before all collapsed to the ground at this time. The sudden reversal of the scene on the screen made Sigong Muhang's eyes shrink suddenly, and the good mood he had seen before Li Tian was arrested completely disappeared. Although, before this action, he had already prepared for nothing, but after this scene really happened, he still couldn't accept it calmly. As expected of a speed quirks that broke through quirks, you can't see it at all. The doctor looked at the scene in the picture, but he was surprisingly calm. Don't worry, the probes I put on Nomu's body are all ultra-high-speed lenses. If you slow down 100 times later, you should be able to see clearly. The doctor explained casually, not sure if he was talking to himself or talking to Deadwood. Now, take those guys back first. Those rare quirks, you can't just squat in prison and waste time, the doctor said, and his hands quickly operated on the keyboard. The originally fixed screen suddenly changed after the doctor started the operation. Originally, the artificial human Nomu, who should have been sentenced to death by Li Tian, twisted his body joints one by one at this time, propped up his body directly from the ground, stood upright, and pulled his head out of the steel drill that went through their heads. It's really great. After Dr. David's invention is combined with Nomu, even if Nomu is killed by a headshot, it can temporarily replace the brain to control Nomu's quirks, the doctor said excitedly. But the screen vibrated violently, and it could be seen that Nomu with the camera was rushing towards Li Tian quickly. At this time, several other Nomu also appeared in the screen. Each Nomu's body swelled scary, not the kind of strengthened swell, but more like a balloon that is about to explode, swell. The sound didn't come over, and at the moment when Nomu swelled to the limit, the screen in front of them had gone black and disappeared. Apparently, nothing is dead, and Li Tian, they won't get hurt naturally. Veteran professional hero group Pussycat's private forest territory. At this time, including Li Tian, everyone present looked at the sky with unhappy faces. The sky is filled with black smoke, because a large piece of smoke is gradually fading away. Just now, there was a big bang here, and the bombs were the 5 Nomu who were sentenced to death by Li Tian. But Li Tian never imagined that he had already passed the steel rod through the opponent's brain, and he was not dead yet. This vitality. Too much. Looking at the power of the explosion just now, if it wasn't for Li Tian who quickly threw the 5 big guys into the sky at the end, it is of course impossible for everyone present to be killed by the explosion, but this open space should be able to grow more in the future. Out of a Wang Shaoqi. The 4 members of the hero group Pussycat, and the 6 classmates of Li Tian, are looking at the large fireworks in the sky, with fear on their faces. At this moment, Li Tian also frowned tightly, looking at the villain who should have 10 collapsed on the ground, but at this moment, there were only 6 left. The owners of the 4 rare quirks have disappeared. Rescued. Li Tian snorted coldly in his heart. Although Li Tian was throwing the 5 Nomu bombs into the sky just now, he also saw the scene of 4 people being rescued at a glance. From the mouths of the 4 villain who fainted on the ground, large pieces of mud vomited out, wrapped each other up, and then disappeared out of thin air. If Li Tian hadn't been busy throwing Nomu into the sky, the 4-1 can't escape. That quirks is indeed the League of Villains. Li Tian shook his head and murmured. He thought that after he took Kurogiri away last time, the League of Villains lost the convenient teleportation quirks, but he didn't expect. All for One has entered, and the villain even has this teleportation quirks. Although this teleportation quirks is not as convenient as Kurogiri's portal quirks, but with this teleportation, it will definitely be very beneficial for villain to attack, retreat and defend. Li Tian. Li Tian, are you okay? Li Tian was thinking, when Iida's voice came to his ears. It turned out that it was Iida who saw that the battle was over, so he launched quirks and rushed over quickly, while the others, including the 4 from Pussycat, were also walking this way. It's nothing. Li Tian put aside the thoughts in his mind, with a smile on his face, and said regretfully, there are 4 troublesome villain who were rescued by taking advantage of the explosion just now. 4 villain were rescued. Iida was startled, and looked down. Sure enough, there were only 6 villain lying on the mound not far away, and 4 of them were missing. The villain doesn't matter, as long as Li Tian. You are not injured. The North American short-hair cat who came over said. The puppet cat on the side also nodded. The scene of villain being rescued was naturally not hidden from the puppet cat's eyes, so the 4 of them had already been mentally prepared. Those 4 people's quirks are tricky, Li Tian said in a deep voice. This time, to be honest, if it wasn't for the Golden Mosk's ability to suppress quirks, it didn't suppress all of his speed force, and the villain who had the foresight at the end didn't know if he didn't activate quirks against him, or something else. The reason does not predict the final result. I'm afraid, it was really captured successfully. Where does Li Tian know the anguish in the heart of that predictable quirks in the villain? His quirks are called future sight, which can connect his own eyes to his eyes in the future and share visual images. But you have to be able to see if you can foresee. The speed at which Li Tian was running, he couldn't see it now, and he who could predict the future also couldn't catch Li Tian's figure after Li Tian arrived. Being able to accurately find Li Tian's location is not because he can predict Li Tian's future, but after entering the battlefield, he is constantly linking with the eyes of the future to predict the future of this area. Finally found an area that Li Tian will pass by in the future, and then kept linking the time of that place, accurately, and quickly found the time when Li Tian would pass through that area, deduced that Li Tian would appear in the exact few seconds, only then did light lag time stop aim at that area to prepare for time pause. As for why he didn't predict to the end, it was naturally because the future him was knocked out by Li Tian. It didn't take long after the explosion. Li Tian greeted several people, and prepared to move out the villain that he had abolished in the forest, and re-entered the forest. Forehead. The number seems to be a bit too much. Li Tian looked at the 5 villain he had beaten down at the beginning, and murmured in his heart. We can't let Uncle Li Tian run back and forth 7 or 8 times, let's move out one by one. Yes. Li Tian's eyes lit up immediately. In this forest, besides it, there are many people. As he likes to help each other with his classmates, of course he can ask for help in this kind of thing. Li Tian, didn't you say that there are many villain? Why? Iida couldn't help asking as he watched Li Tian, who went in empty-handed and came back with a bunch of guns. Haha, the students are so enthusiastic. I heard that the battle here is over, and then I took the villain back and rushed back, one by one scrambling to help me carry it. I don't want to. I was almost in a hurry with me, so I can only come back first with these dangerous things. Li Tian said with a smile on his face. I see, the students are really friendly. Iida nodded with a gratifying smile on his face from the old leader. Yes. Mutual help, enthusiasm and friendliness have always been the latent qualities of our heroes. Li Tian also cooperated with an old father's gratifying smile. On the side, a few boys and girls who didn't want Iida to be so upright and dignified had expressions of helplessness, and instantly wanted to understand what Li Tian had done. While chatting for days, after 2 minutes, in the woods, Aizawa Shota and Bradkin stepped out. It can be seen that they have already received the Mandalay Cat's words, so they are not as eager as they were at the beginning. Li Tian, come here. Aizawa Shota saw Li Tian and waved from afar. Li Tian responded and walked towards Aizawa Shota. However, on the way, Li Tian probably understood that Baixiang Zexiao wanted to ask something too much. As predicted, a remote corner of the woods. These villain, this time they are coming for you, Aizawa Shota said lightly. On the way, he had already heard from the Mandalay Cat about the villain's actions against Li Tian, so he naturally thought of revenge with the soul. Yeah. Li Tian nodded, and said, it should be the revenge mentioned by the possessing soul, and it came at an astonishingly fast speed. Indeed. Aizawa Shota also nodded. He also didn't expect at all that the soul-possessed soul had just uttered harsh words 2 days ago, but it turned out that only a few days later today, the revenge has already come. Of course, time cannot be counted in this way. Although it was only 2 days ago that he learned about his revenge from the soul-hunting soul, before the soul-hunting soul was arrested, he had already planned it for a while. So, This attack is actually not too fast. It's just that I didn't expect that soul-possessed soul to have contact with the League of Villains. Li Tian shook his head. Although the League of Villains organization is just a low-level villain organization, but his leader, Sigong Muhong, is a disciple of All for One, a villain who once almost ruled Neon. And although All Might crippled most of All for One's strength back then, the remaining forces are definitely not weak. If Sigong Muhong can subdue the remnants of All for One in the name of League of Villains, then its power and potential are definitely not small. It is even enough to make the League of Villains, a little-known organization, become a villain organization force that can be counted among Neon. Last time in USJ, the main reason why Li Tian let go of the dead handle wooden hanging at that time was to set up a trick to lead All for One, and the result? Naturally needless to say. As for the dead handle wooden hanging, as well as the League of Villains, whether it is Li Tian or the official, there is no intention to underestimate it. Although, this is just for All for One's sake. League of Villains. Aizawa Shota was slightly silent. He also didn't expect that the villain organization, which was so bold but not worth mentioning at that time, would be backed by a legendary villain like All for One. Although I don't want to admit it, All for One can definitely be called a first-class teacher regardless of experience or ability, villain teacher. And the opponent's disciple, Sigong Muhong, must have great potential. The only thing that made Aizawa Shota rejoice was that the other party obviously had not completed the education of the dead handle wooden hanging, and was taken to prison. Presumably, without the guidance of All for One, the other party's growth would not be smooth sailing. Besides, a haze flashed in Aizawa Shota's eyes, and he vaguely guessed the attitude and reason for the League of Villains. League of Villains don't need to deal with him. That organization is not the target of our hero or you students, just leave them to the professional hero to deal with. Shang Longshao said too lightly. Li Tian nodded. He was actually the same as Aizawa Shota, and he could roughly guess why the official attitude towards the League of Villains and dead hand wood hanging was like this. You must know that since All for One was hit, it has disappeared for several years, and the remaining forces of the other party have also gone underground, which cannot be detected. This part of the power of All for One, the official, is more important than anyone else. I have been looking for it, wanting to completely uproot this residual force. And now, they finally had someone who helped them turn their target from the dark to the bright, so they naturally wouldn't simply catch each other. I'm afraid they will wait for the opponent to gather most of the remaining forces of All for One before they strike with a thunderbolt and uproot all the opponent's forces. But if we don't consider it from the perspective of the real world, but speculate from the way he watched anime in his previous life. Although he didn't see the back, it was obvious that the official campaign against League of Villains failed, and it was more interesting to defeat League of Villains by All Might, Green Valley, or the overall class attack. I hope you don't get away with it, Li Tian thought to himself. After explaining to Aizawa Shota what the Mandalay cat in the forest didn't know, Li Tian also retreated. At this time, the contestants of the test of courage in the forest also came out one after another. In groups of 3 or 4, carrying 1 or 3, villain came out of the forest with their faces pulled. It didn't take long. About 3 to 5 minutes later, the people in the forest returned to the open space with all 15 villain. Counting the 6 villain here, there are a total of 21 villain lined up together, which looks a little bit spectacular. Student Li Tian, these villain are. Bradkin looked at the row of villain who were all collapsed on the ground after checking, and then turned to look at Li Tian asked. Among them, there are a few villain who still have their eyes open, but they are also not moving at all. Li Tian watched a few of them wake up, but the villain who were also unable to move then reacted, and quickly said, I just paralyzed his nerves with a special method and sent him to the hospital. With the current level of medical care, it is easy to recover. Over there, Bradkin and Aizawa Shota breathed a sigh of relief, and then heard Li Tian add. By the way, I haven't developed this method for a long time, so I don't know the severity of the attack, so a small part of the nerves should be damaged by me. There should be no big problem with this part of the treatment, but there may be some nerves in the future. Disease problems such as sequelae in terms of aspects. Forehead. The corners of the mouths of the 2 teachers who had just breathed a sigh of relief suddenly twitched. Don't think they can't understand what a small group is. I'm afraid that most of these villain will have serious neurological sequelae. That is, commonly known as neuropathy. As if seeing what the 2 teachers were thinking, Li Tian looked aggrieved, pointed to the pile of firearms and said, it can't be my fault, they even used this kind of thing, I was nervous for a moment, but it's inevitable. Hee. Whether it's Aizawa Shota, Bradkin, the 4 from Pussycat, or the other 39,790 students, they couldn't help but sneer when they heard Li Tian's words. Looking at the villain lying in a row, it's no wonder they believed Li Tian's nonsense. However, neither Bradkin nor Aizawa Shota intended to blame Li Tian at all. On the contrary, they supported leaving and abolishing the action of villain. The experience gained in hero activities for many years can clearly tell them how many professional hero and villain fall down every year without making their opponents completely lose their fighting ability. And, in the eyes of even a teacher who protects his shortcomings, this group of villain, that is already damned for using guns on the students. But not every student has the same ability to dodge bullets like Li Tian, and not everyone has the same ability as Kirishima and Taijie. Quirks can temporarily defend against bullets. Humans, even in this age of quirks. But, after all, people are just people, and if they are killed, they will die. Even though it was late at night, after receiving the alarm from Shangying's school, the police quickly rushed to the scene by helicopter. And this kind of thing happened. Naturally, Shangying's forest training cannot continue. And the number of villain with as many as people obviously cannot be transported back by the helicopter brought by the police. Naturally, they need to be transported back by Shangying's bus. Certainly. Naturally, the police and Shangying were not so eager to go back quickly. The villain were transported to the hospital by Shangying's bus, while Li Tian and Pussycat returned to the urban area by helicopter as the parties involved. Others stayed in the camp for another night honestly. Except for the dozen or so people who passed the end of the semester, the other 20 people also did not escape the fate of tutoring until 2 o'clock in the morning. I am back. Back home, Li Tian yelled habitually. And no response. Li Tian is not surprised either. When he went to participate in Shangying's forest training camp, his little aunt Yu Shanyu went out. It is said that Nonali Wai managed to get a leave of absence, and then specially invited his aunt to play with her for a few days. As for where to go, then I didn't tell Li Tian. Li Tian didn't bother to ask. After all, he had already learned about the nature of Wai's work in Nonli, and he was naturally interested in this so-called confidentiality regulation. Call. Sure enough, it's still comfortable at home. Li Tian slumped on the sofa, and his whole expression immediately became sluggish. Because of the attack in the forest training camp, he kept his vigilance on the way home after giving his statement at the police station, to engage in surprise attacks. Of course, villain is not afraid of him. That is, every time he finishes dealing with the villain, he cannot hand them over to the police like the professional hero, but needs to go to the police station to record a statement in person. Once or twice is okay, but if you run to the police station every day to record statements, then Li Tian will be annoyed to death. That's one of the inconveniences of his unusual provisional license. To a certain extent, the guy with the soul scheme has succeeded. Li Tian looked at the ceiling, thinking of his cautious appearance when he came back, and murmured to himself. But it's impossible to let him be careless. You can't let him activate the speed force as soon as he goes out. In that case, is there any difference between him and playing standalone? No. Li Tian sat up suddenly, with a stern look on his face. The original plan to hurt villain took too long. We must come up with an immediate solution to this matter. The best way is to wait until the training is about the same time, and the Thunderstrike will completely solve this matter. Why don't you take the initiative and kill the villain organization that wants to attack me? No. Now I don't even know which villain organization is doing something to me, let alone find their location and take the initiative to go out. Then, lure the snake out of the hole, take the initiative to seduce those villain to attack, and speed up the progress of the painful plan? It doesn't work either. In terms of how to seduce, the initiative is on the side of the villain. Being passive and keeping vigilant all the time is definitely a big disadvantage. How about killing chickens and scaring monkeys, killing 1 or 2 large villain organizations, and scaring those xiao who want to do it? Okay. First of all, I don't know where there is a large villain organization, and the temporary hero license does not allow me to take the initiative to trouble the villain organization. The knife used to kill chickens is also a controlled knife. The plan is a good plan, but there is no plan for execution. Li Tian complained to himself helplessly. Or, just find a way to get rid of that bastard who possesses the soul. Li Tian narrowed his eyes, and as soon as the thoughts in his mind changed, he was directly thrown out of his mind. It would be fine if the possessed soul was not caught by the police, but it doesn't matter if he caught him and killed him. But now the other party is in prison. If he takes the initiative to attack and kill, this has already touched his psychological bottom line. It is impossible for him to do such a thing. Could it be that you have to wait passively for the other party to attack? Li Tian scratched his head with a look of helplessness. After all, his authority is too low. The strength is enough, but there is a lack of a stage to show his strength. Let him carry out the plan to kill chickens and monkeys, then things will be much simpler. Damn it. If it wasn't for the time travel thing that has no clue, such a trivial matter would be nothing more than water. Leaving sighed. If he can travel through the past with the speed force now, even if he doesn't go back to my island to make up for the ghost, he can go directly to the other party's house and monitor whether the other party has contacted those villain organizations. At that time, whether it is to take the initiative to attack or hand it over to the professional hero, it will not be considered a matter. How about? A light flashed in Li Tian's mind, and he murmured in a low voice, kill chickens to frighten monkeys, lure snakes out of holes, take the initiative to attack. These seem to be connected and used together. New League of Villains HQ. After several rounds of mud transmission, the 4 villains rescued by the doctor from Li Tian were finally transferred to this secret base. It's finally here. The doctor looked at the villain of the 4 rare quirks with a kind face. What's the use of rescuing these wastes, and 5 Nomu were still sacrificed. The dead handle wood hanging on the side of the 4 people who collapsed on the ground ignored their angry eyes and said casually. Their quirks are much more valuable than those Nomus. The doctor grinned. Time pause, precognition, mind link, and sealed quirks. If these 4 hadn't met the half-pedaled the field of ecstasy, the kid who made their quirks invalid, under the surprise attack, maybe even you before, can't escape. That was before. Dead Handwood said lightly. He is now. Just like Li Tian, he is a person who has half-stepped into the realm of gods. Even. He is more aware of his own position than Li Tian, and he can display his strength better, but his body can't bear the strength of quirks at that level. But Li Tian can be used easily. Hey, Saganmu, don't you want to try to see how strong your strength is now? The doctor suddenly said with a light smile after changing the topic. Huh. Sigongmu paused, frowned and looked at the doctor. Didn't you say that I'd better not fight during this time? That was before. The doctor smiled and took something from the side. This is now. What the doctor is holding in his hand is the quirk's augmentation device sent by Kurogiri desperately and Kori desperately from my island. Have you finished researching this thing? Sigong Muhong looked at the quirk's amplifier held by the doctor and asked casually. This thing. He remembered that when the doctor just studied it for a few days, he said that although this thing is good, it can't reach the level of quirks beyond the limit of human beings. Even if it is half a step limit, it will not increase. The research is over. The doctor nodded, looking at the quirk's augmentation device in his hand with regret in his eyes. After all, I am not in the same research direction as Dr. David. What is useful to me in this device is in that device. In my head, this. To be honest, I don't understand it at all. Then what's the use of this thing? Sigongmu frowned slightly and asked in a low voice. Amplification quirks, of course. The doctor grinned, not waiting for Shigaraki to continue asking, and continued. The power of quirks, in addition to constantly breaking the limit to become stronger, the development of quirks applications, and the recently popular quirks factor injection. Another way to become stronger is to control. When you can perfectly control your own quirks, move your heart at will, and it will naturally become stronger. And this device is to enhance the ability to control quirks by activating part of the peripheral nerves in the human brain that control quirks. Needless to say, if ordinary professional hero get this device, I am afraid it will be a little more proficient. Can easily compare with the top 100 professional hero. Unfortunately, we only have this one, and I can't do production, otherwise the strength of our organization will definitely usher in a surge. The doctor shook his head with a look of pity. Enhancing the control of quirks. Does it work for me too? Saganmu frowned slightly. Of course. The doctor nodded. However, the effect is not as strong as you imagined. For ordinary people, this device can enhance the control of quirks, but for you who have half-stepped into the inhuman realm as a human being, his most important function is to let you clearly perceive your own limits. I perceive my limit as a human being, the doctor said with a warm smile on his face. Shigaraki is not stupid. The doctor just mentioned a point, and he instantly understood what the doctor meant. You mean, when I wear this thing, I can see how much strength I use will not exceed my current physical limit. That's right. The doctor nodded with a smile. It can be said that it is the most suitable device for you at the moment. If you are in the metamorphosis period, if you can often use quirks to fight without using quirks that overload your body, then it will definitely be of great benefit to your transformation. And since you were the one who overwhelmed the organization with your strength, you have to go out and show off your muscles. The organization of these people is not too weak. It is just right to show off your muscles and expand the League of Villains, by the way. With your current power, it is absolutely impossible to fight a war that destroys society, the doctor said. I understand. Shigaraki closed his eyes and thought for a few moments, then nodded directly. The destructive desire in his eyes was not concealed at all. Then, let's start with the organization of these people. Below, listening to the conversation between the doctor and Shigaraki, the eyes of the four collapsed villains showed unconcealable resentment and worry. They couldn't understand the quirk's singularity and the limits of human beings in the conversation between the two, they just knew. The League of Villains was going to attack their organization. The initial target was their organization. But their organization didn't know it at all. The success rate of this kind of sneak attack is absolutely high. Even if it fails, their organization will definitely suffer heavy losses. You League of Villains, don't want to die, don't die. Column. The hearts of the four roared crazily, and their eyes were full of ferocious bloodshot eyes, glaring at Saganmu and the doctor, but they couldn't even turn their heads, they were struggling crazily. It can only make a low, woo-woo, sound, which can't even attract the slightest attention.